What levels of cheapness have astonished you? My dad is a physics professor at a university, which if you know of this breed of humans, none of this might surprise you. Pointy, I swear to all that is sacred, goes to the cafeteria on campus and makes a meal out of the free condiments, Mexican style chips also, chopped onion packets, crackers, etc. Then, he'll call me to brag about it. Another one he does. He found a store that sells expired food for a ridiculously low price. He said he spent $20 and now has microwavable popcorn for life. My dad never buys new tires, he buys used ones that the shop keeps when people replace them. He gets the tires for super cheap after negotiating them, like $15 to $20. The best part is that he avoids driving to not waste gas so much that the tires actually never wear out, they just rot. When he feels like splurging, he will buy a pork shoulder, which is a lot of meat, for about $7 to $10. He cuts off all of the meat and grinds it along with free condiments from a cafeteria into a cylinder shape that he wraps with shopping bags from a store. Then, he freezes it. When he wants some, he slices some pieces off like patties and sautés them, in its own oil of course. This will last him months. One time he called me while I was cooking. He asked me what I was making, and I said that I was cooking spaghettis. He said that spaghettis is about 3x the price per mass as rice, and throwing away my money. He doesn't use toilet paper, just water, which is actually cleaner anyway. I'll add more as I keep remembering them. Edit. Using water to wash your post sheeters is a very common method throughout the world, especially in poorer countries, where the people don't have enough to obtain, or rather spend resources on other things other than toilet paper. I'm sure that there are many methods. The one I have used when overseas is as follows. Sheet while hovering and keeping the butt cheeks apart. This reduces the sheet to skin contact. Also hemorrhoids. Get a little bucket/large cup and use it to run water down your ass crack while bent forward. If you can, lather up your hands with soap and use your fingers. Rinse wash your hands. My daily routine is set so that I shower after my morning sheets anyway, so it works out fine. This method avoids the use of toilet paper and your anus is cleaner than with toilet paper. Someone brought up that sheet can get stuck under your nails. Keep your nails short and clean when using this method. I went to a birthday dinner for my mother-in-law at a Filipino restaurant. Along with my wife and I, 4 of her friends were there. The friends ordered a mountain of food for the table. There were 7 of us there, but if there were a dozen, we couldn't have finished it all. This was a bit irritating right off the bat, because while I was happy to pitch in for her birthday dinner, I didn't want to pay 20% of a goddamn feast from Westeros. It would end up being over $200 worth of food. So then the check comes, and I pitch in my credit card, and 3 out of the 4 friends turn into statues, except the oldest gentleman, who offers something like $15. I grab the bill and divide it by 5, leaving out the dishes and drinks that my wife and I ordered for ourselves, and tally it up, saying what everyone owes. Crickets. I remind everyone that they were the ones who ordered this giant mound of food in the first place, half of which is going to go to waste. To prevent awkwardness, my mother-in-law grabs the bill and runs off, leaving my credit card to go pay it. My wife prevents me from stopping her and causing a scene. I quietly lay into the 3 deadbeats at the table for letting an elderly woman on a fixed income pay a $200+ bill for her own birthday dinner. I lose it and call them faking moochers, and suddenly there's that scene everyone was working so hard to prevent, with them screaming at me and me screaming back. The restaurant owners understandably intervene and toss all of us out. I'd go back in and apologize and explain what happened. The restaurant, to their credit, knock 40% off the bill out of nothing more than kindness. Salo Grill in Las Vegas, y'all, and cancel the charge on my mother-in-law's card, and I picked up the rest, which was still quite a bit, but I felt a lot better about it. PSH. One year, my grandparents lived through the Depression. They waste nothing. Their freezer is a menagerie of ancient treasures. Last year we ate Thanksgiving at their house. My mom did all the cooking, but my grandma contributed a couple of desserts. One was a marshmallow jello sort of thing with pistachios. When we got done eating, she proudly declared that it had been sitting in the freezer since 1996. She was afraid we'd find out and would waste it by not eating it. Weird thing is it was still tasty as hell. TLDR grandparents fed us 15-year-old pudding. Edit. Oh, wow. I figured this would just sit at the bottom of the thread. To all the people saying they don't believe this happened, it definitely did. I thought it was hilarious at the time, but it is kind of surprising we didn't get sick. My dad was actually annoyed that I found it at all odd. To give you an idea of what being raised in that house was like. This was when my grandparents were moving out of their house into a retirement home too, so they were being forced to use up what they had saved for a long time. I think that probably played a part. They are both still alive today. Grandma's 92 and grandpa's 94, so they must be doing something right. Edit. 15 years, not 16. Accidentally added to current year when I wrote this. This was Thanksgiving 2011. I was a bartender at a country club. Employees are allowed to take home any food left over from weddings. After a wedding full of drunken assholes throwing things, grabbing waitresses, and other crap, the mother of the bride marched into the kitchen demanding two things: that all leftovers be given to her right now, and that the 18% tip added onto the bill for us should be removed. After explaining that she had already paid enough for this wedding and didn't want us getting anything else from her. This was after she had made sure that no tip jars would be out for us because they would take care of us later. Edit. I guess taking home the food isn't a standard practice. It was here. Edit 2. I agree completely about the tip jar at weddings. It doesn't look right, but that doesn't mean you get to screw the waitstaff out of money for the hard work they did for your daughter's wedding. If you don't want the wedding to be cheap, pick up the tip. Otherwise leave the jars out and let everyone know your true colors. Edit 3. Lots of people don't like tipping, which is fine, but like most waiters and bartenders my salary is based on tipping. And yes, when I work extremely hard for your event for hours and then find out I'm only going to get 6.50 an hour, less than minimum wage, it does get annoying. Also, stop being cheap. This will be so close to the bottom that I don't think it's worth posting, but this story has been on my chest for a while, and it's perfect for this thread. A number of years ago I was waiting at a Greyhound bus station and I noticed some children playing with the arcade machines. A little girl, maybe around 5 years old, asks her mother for some quarters to play the games. The girl gets the quarters from her mom and goes back to machines. Meanwhile, a small boy, who is about the same age, is just mashing keys randomly because he doesn't have any quarters to start the game. The girl sees him and offers some of her quarters. He's obviously pretty happy about this, says thank you, and literally runs back to the arcade machine. I'm watching this happen and thinking about how great this is. These children, who, I'm pretty sure, had never met before, were being so kind to each other. The mother of the girl is visibly upset. She gets up, scolds her daughter for giving away her money, and says to the boy these exact words: "Please give those quarters back. My daughter wasn't supposed to give them to you." She takes the quarters and gives them back to her daughter for her to keep using on the arcade machines. Now the boy's happiness has been swept away, and the girl has been berated for being nice. All of this over mere quarters. Quarters that were going to be lost to the arcade machine anyways. It was insane. I really hate it. TLDR, a little girl gives a small boy some quarters to play with an arcade machine. Angry mother takes quarters back. Edit. This was my first comment, and I'm pretty darn happy with the response. In the future I'll be sure not to include statements like my opening sentence. Some people are saying I should have given the boy some quarters. I probably should have, but his father was sitting nearby, and he called his son back to him soon after this happened. I would have needed to be pretty quick to jump in with quarters. Also, I've always been more of a passive observer type, which is probably why I noticed this situation in the first place. Even if I had time, I don't think I would have thought to intervene. At Pizza Hut where I work, customers will do just about anything to get free or very cheap food, as if it isn't already cheap. Sometimes, we make a mistake, and they are absolutely entitled to compensation, but some of these people will complain about any little detail of their pizza to get it for free. But my favorite is a group of ladies who come in every Sunday morning after church. They all order on separate checks, and they all get water and one small item like a personal pan pizza or a cup of soup. Their checks only turn out to be about $4 or $5 a piece, but they still, every single weekend, feel the need to announce and remind me we are seniors, so we need our senior citizen discount, too. That makes their checks even cheaper, so they feel entitled to leave a few nickels and dimes on the table as a tip. Point at it to everyone saying that I shouldn't be judgmental because they might live on a fixed income. I should have clarified that they aren't elderly by any means. They are all in their late 50s at most, and only one of the ladies, someone's mother, appears to be over 75 or so. The rest of them are all well dressed with nice jewelry and drive nice cars, and not technically seniors, but we give them the discount anyway, because my boss goes by the customer is always right motto. Point also, even if they are on a fixed income, they shouldn't be eating at a restaurant that has servers living off of tips. They could just as easily get fast food somewhere that doesn't have waitstaff that are making $2.83 an hour. This isn't nearly as good as most of the others in this thread, but as a bartender, the worst tab I was ever stiffed on was $241. A big fat zero with a line through it on the tip line. I was dumbfounded. This group had me running miles off all night, and every time they needed something, I was right there, checking on them, making sure they were okay. The whole deal. I should have known when he handed me the card at the beginning and said the dreaded "we'll get you at the end." What really made me more pissed than the no tip was the fact that they took pictures of the receipt and passed it around. I was speechless. After I picked the receipt and processed the whole I seriously just got stiffed on $242. The guy had the nerve to ask me for something else. He started with "Oh, hey, can I also get?" But I just cut him off with a nope and walked away. It was about 15 minutes from the last call, so I just went in the back and waited until the lights came up and we were done. Much better than flipping my sheet and losing my job. Honorable mention. I once overheard a few guys talking about Reddit and was like, "Hey, are you guys Redditors? Let me buy you around." They seemed like pretty cool guys. We talked about stuff we'd seen on the front page, what subreddits we followed, etc. When it came time for them to pay the tab, they signed it, said bye and left. When I picked up the check, instead of a tip, they had just drawn a bunch of upvotes in the tip section. Reddit is cool and all, and I thought meeting Redditors in the wild would be cool, but upvotes don't pay my bills. Edit. For the record, I'm not one of those bartenders that feels everyone should tip at all times, every time. I understand not everyone is going to tip. It's unavoidable. For some people, tourists, etc., it's not part of their custom to tip, and I get that. But my thing is, if you're not going to tip, you can't, in my opinion, expect anything other than average service. We work off of tips, so if you aren't tipping, I'm going to do the bare minimum that's expected of me. If you see me skip over you and help someone else, it's probably because they are tipping me and you aren't. You can't be high maintenance, expect to be hooked up and not provide something in return. I realize that this might make me come off as kind of a as soon as possible, and I don't mean it to, but it's the truth. My 13-year-old daughter was invited to a small birthday party at a mediocre chain restaurant, Ruby Tuesdays, for her best friend. The girlfriend is over here quite often and regularly eats dinner, breakfast, lunch etc. if she is here, and sleeps over about twice a week during the summertime. She's been included in trips to the amusement park and water park nearby. We have season tickets, but there is always something to eat, funnel cakes, etc., movies, and the occasional trip to Dairy Queen, and I've never asked to be paid or have her pay her own way. We treat her as one of our own. Imagine my disgust when my daughter calls me from the restaurant bathroom, nearly in tears, telling me that they just told her she will have to pick up her own check after dinner and dessert have been served. Check was like $13. The guy actually said separate checks to the waitress, but my daughter didn't know what that meant. She had a few bucks on her, but she was short about $5. The other girl's father told my daughter that she would have to stay and wash dishes or something, and got really ugly with her, like she misled them or something. I have the parents' cell phone numbers, called him and asked him real nice things like if he could spot her $10 until he brought her home, and I would pay him back. He refused and made it like somehow my daughter and I were scamming him. He suggested that I call the front desk and square it away because they were leaving and were going to leave my daughter there if she couldn't pay, so he wouldn't have the cops chasing him down on his daughter's birthday. I did call the front desk, gave them my credit card, included a healthy tip, and told my daughter I would be there to pick her up in 10 minutes. Don't go anywhere. When I got there, the clown was trying to get my daughter to leave with his family. Now that the bill was paid, his daughter was in tears. Needless to say, it got ugly. Went to dinner with some friends and their friends. It was a really nice Japanese place and we all had a fantastic meal. When it came to pay, we all kinda threw in roughly what we owed with enough spare for a tip, except for one lad who was being tighter than an asshole, making sure he was only gonna pay exactly what his meal was to the cent and nothing more. So the receipt comes back, and there's a good bit of change left over for a tip, but since the staff went above and beyond for us, because some of us had special dietary requirements, needed to make sure things were gluten-free and all kinds of picky or awkward things, we wanted to throw in a bit more on as well. Well, this guy was shocked. He couldn't fathom us leaving a tip. According to him, we were throwing away our money, and the food was already overpriced. We didn't really think much of it, because this is Ireland, and tipping is generally not the done thing here. Well, you know what this guy does? When we're all leaving and getting our coats, he goes back to the table and grabs the big tip we had left for the staff. I guess we all thought he had forgotten something, or just didn't notice, but we didn't find out until later what he had done. When we were having drinks in the pub, he said something along the lines of, "I should go out for dinner with you a lot more often." I came out with more money than I went in with. What really pissed us off was that the way he said it, he was so proud of himself. We were all absolutely livid, but he said sure you didn't want it anyway, and was acting like we had just tossed our money in the bin. I haven't spoken to him since then, and I'm glad to see that he has never been invited out with this particular group again. I saw him again in a different restaurant maybe a year ago. Looked like he was out with a work event or something. All guys wearing suits. I nearly wanted to walk up to their table and announce to them that he's a thieving bastard who steals tips and they should all keep a close eye on him, and tell the staff the same thing. I really wish I had done it. But what an asshole. I'm kinda late to the party, but I'll share some of my stories that I've seen over the years. When I was a waiter, I had a person ask me for a cup of hot water and a glass of ice. He then pulled out a tea packet, brewed some tea, used our sugar to sweeten it, then poured it onto the ice for iced tea. I just shook my head and thought, congrats man, you beat the system and saved $2. I had a table split for dinner, which isn't uncommon, except they split a Pepsi too. What the fuck? I told them I can't give them a refill if they're sharing, and they said that's fine. I had a woman throw a huge fit about wanting to order the kids' steak. I explained to her that the kids' menu was discounted heavily, so we could appeal to families more. The kids' 6-ounce steak was $6, while an 8 ounces of the same cut was $12 on the adult menu. She demanded to see the manager and said that it's a medical condition and she has to order off the kids' menu because she can't eat an adult portion. My manager said, oh, that's cool. We actually have a special on the 6 ounces cut right now for $10. It's the same size as the kids' steak. She was speechless and I was laughing miles off. But in that business I also witnessed the other extreme. I once had a table on a Friday night that consisted of 24 people at a big company Christmas party. The floor plan was changed before I arrived to give me a section that could accommodate them. They ordered almost everything on the menu, top shelf drinks, sides of shrimp, big steaks, and in general had a great time. I was at the top of my game all night and they racked up a bill of $740. There was an automatic $125 tip added to that. The guy signs the credit card receipt and adds another $135 to it. I was speechless. I used to work for the Home Shopping Network, HSN, in the warehouse department. All of the clothing / underwear / purses / makeup items purchased from around the country came to this one warehouse where only 60 people handled the returns. If your grandmother ordered a sweater and returned it, there's a high chance I handled it. Anyway, people would return the absolute most worn out sheet. Our job was to open the package, scan the account number and the item, and decide if the item was good enough to put back into stock. Items like underwear were automatically sent to bad in case you were wondering. If an item was pristine with no smells, like perfume or cigarettes, and had no stains, tears, or hair on it, we could fold it back up and return it to stock. HSN had a crappy policy that said items could be returned within 90 days of purchase. Faking old ladies could buy that season's ugly ass shoes for $65, wear them for 3 months, and then send them back right before the deadline and get full credit for them, citing the reason for their return as defective or too small. Yeah, okay, if it was defective, why did you wear it so much? If it was too small, how did you get your fat ass feet in them in order to wear them down to nothing? I saw shoes that were covered in grass and dog shit and worn down to the point I wonder if they did it all on purpose. I didn't think they deserved full credit for that, especially when I had to send them to bad. It pissed me off. I'm all for saving money, hell, I live off coupons and sales, but what these women did was just downright dishonest and wrong. This is going to be buried, but here it goes. TLDR, a family kept their child on life support for 2.5 years, just because they received extra government benefits. If anyone cares, I'll add the rest. Edit. It's sad. You asked for it. Typical welfare family. 4 kids at home. Parents are receiving disability pay. Their daughter came in 2.5 years ago immediately after her birth and was put on life support. I believe she was a real serious case of cerebral palsy. Most of her body was also failing, and she was pretty much a vegetable till the day she died. Expressions here and there, nonsensical smiles every once in a while, but essentially only a body. I don't know most of the complications, nor do I know how the family behaved in the beginning. I started working at this hospital when she was almost 1 year old, but I do know that the family visits were declining. Once a week became once a month. Hour-long visits now took 30 minutes at best. Her regular visitor used to be her mother, and now grandmother took the spot. It became apparent with every code blue called that the parents would not let this one go. They were offered DNR forms multiple times. They were told she wouldn't make it much longer, and even if she did she would need close nursing care 24/7. They offered to move her somewhere else, or have her disconnected, and just let her go on her own, but the parents always refused. That's when we found out how much money they were receiving from having a disabled child, how many other kids they had, etc. Their plan became even more apparent when both mom and dad missed her first and second birthdays. Her grandmother cried, but just pushed on. About 2 months ago she began to code. Her spastic movements had once again made her tracheotomy tube come loose, and she started to turn blue. I've only heard rumors of this so far as I didn't work the weekend this happened, but some blame was put on the hospital by the parents. Apparently they didn't try their hardest to resuscitate her. Her body quickly failed, and her suffering ended. Most of us were glad. You could even tell her grandmother breathed a sigh of relief. When I was in middle school, a friend of mine was having her birthday. She only wanted to do something small, so it was just her and me. The original plan was to go to the fair that was in town. So we show up. Her mom freaks out because the wristbands are $15 each. I only had $10 on me. And apparently this lady can't shell out $30 for her daughter's birthday. Just to clarify, she didn't get any presents and this trip was supposed to be it. She did buy a cake, but that was it. So we decided to go to the roller rink / laser tag place. Fine, not what we were expecting, but laser tag is awesome. We get there, laser tag is about $8 or so for a couple of rounds. Her mom starts to freak out again because she thinks it's too expensive. Since I had $10, I quickly offered to pay for myself, and her mom grudgingly paid the $8 for her daughter to play. We play, have a good time, etc. Can't really roller skate because rentals are too much, and I didn't bring my rollerblades. Wasn't a part of the original plan. I start to get hungry, but all we have is this tiny cake. I'm hypoglycemic, so I needed something that wasn't just plain sugar, or it would make me sick. The place did sell food, however it was all more than we had left. When buying food is suggested, her mom, once again, freaks out and asks me why I can't just buy my own food. I mumble something about not having enough money and just resign myself to a little cake, trying not to eat any of the frosting. Worst birthday party ever. Still got to laser tag though. It was a friend's birthday and he invited us for a drink. Everyone got 3 coins for 3 consumptions, which was $5 worth. One of his cheap friends gave him an envelope as a birthday gift, with a nice crispy $5 bill enclosed in it. Break even derp. Group assignment at a guy's house from one of my college courses. He made sure to inform all of us to bring our own food and drinks as his mom didn't go shopping, so they had nothing. Keep in mind that this guy's pretty rich, and when we were eating his dad came down and ate from the fridge, so they did have food. A guy in my dorm would regularly come and smoke up all my sheet, pretty much scumbag Steve like. I never ask for money. I always say, next time you come, just bring something for the gang, so we can enjoy sharing. He never shared. The one time he got a bottle of Coke and a bag of chips from the night shop he charged us, which came down to about $1. I flat out told him to shove it up his ass. Edit for clarity on the 3rd story. By he never shared, I was saying we were always the ones buying food and drinks to chill out. He wouldn't bring anything all this time. Then one time he did take care of some food and drinks for all of us to enjoy, but insisted we pay him back, even though we never asked for a dime from him. Worst of all is this guy actually makes the most money among us. We are all students. As part of my mother and father's divorce settlement, I was 5 at the time. My father was responsible for buying my school supplies, while my mother was responsible for my older sister's supplies. My birthday is in early August, so every birthday he would buy me pens, pencils, and paper. He wasn't poor. His and my stepmom's vehicles were never older than 5 years old. They had a houseboat, a ski boat with a Corvette engine, expensive vacations, of course without us, etc. When I was 17, my grandmother had to go into a home for medical reasons. My father always said he hated my car because it was small, old, and not safe. I bought it myself with money I earned since I started working at 15, and since I would babysit my half-sister he wanted me to drive something safer, so he handed me the keys to my grandmother's fully paid off 8-year-old Toyota 4Runner, which she didn't take care of, and I put $1,500 into it to get it running properly. A week later he calls me and tells me the price he settled on was a mid-blue book $8K. The paint was seriously scratched and the car dented in multiple places because my grandmother should not have been driving. I promptly returned the vehicle, threw the keys in the mailbox with a note, I don't have that kind of money, so I'm going back to my old car. The bill for getting it fixed is $1,500. He called a week later and said he guessed, since he didn't pay anything for it, I could have it if I babys it for free. This was on top of school and my other retail job. 10 years later my husband bought me my first new car. I had just put $600 tires on it and fixed a few other things, so I kept driving it a little. My half-sister was 14 and 1/2 and my father asked for it back since she was soon going to need a car to practice driving, so I gave it back. He turned around and sold it for $500 a month later, and at the age of 15 my half-sister became the proud owner of a $28K new car. Ninja Edit. Whoops. I've seemed to have mistaken this for my therapist's office. Thanks for letting me rant about my cheapskate father. I'm late to the party, but this happened to me just yesterday, and I'm still mortified about it. Although I'm 25, I've been lucky to have had a good amount of success financially. My cousin and her boyfriend recently asked if I could be godfather to their children. While I love their kids, the parents are loathsome lazy people who take full advantage of every situation. Example, my aunt and uncle bought a new vehicle recently and told my cousin that she could use their older minivan to transport her brood around until they could buy something else. My cousin and her boyfriend instead tried to sell said minivan. When they discovered they couldn't as it didn't belong to them, they tried to sell it for parts as such. I should have known my being offered godparent status would involve copious favors. First, my cousin asked if I could do her taxes. That turned into also doing her boyfriend's, and then jumping through hoops when they were rightfully audited for double dipping on child tax benefits. However, that pales into comparison to what just unfolded. I decided that, while I don't see my godchildren often, they live in another city, I could do something official-ish and begin saving money towards their college tuition. I made the mistake of mentioning this to my cousin. Her response was, "What? My kids aren't going to college." Dumbfounded, I tried to suggest she maybe didn't know what her spawn's plans were at ages 2 and 8, respectively. When it became clear my cousin was set in this frame of mind, I asked if there was perhaps something else I could do for them. The suggestion was, "Well, we have to go back to school shopping. Cue a day trip to this other city and the local Walmart." Everything was going as terribly as I expected. While her daughter cared little about the quality or brand of the items, she had more fun bending erasers than adoring the Dora the Explorer items. My cousin insisted on selecting the most expensive of everything. Finally, after exhausting the supply list, I headed towards the checkout. Nope. Suddenly, my cousin and her boyfriend began walking towards the back of the store. I turned around to follow them, not sure what they'd forgotten. I still wasn't sure what they were up to until we got to the electronics section. X needs a laptop for school. A laptop? She's 8. Well, they need them at that age. They do. I didn't see that on the list. I motioned for her to give me the supplier list, which she yanked away. Well, not for school, but at home. X is really good with computers. Noticing that X was still enamored with the erasers and not the bevy of laptops nearby, I got her attention. "Hey, X, you see these computers? MMHMM. What do you like to play on them?" Her face became very quizzical. "Your mommy said you really like computers." Silence. Then, I don't know. Before I could say anything, my cousin began screaming, "You faking asshole. I told you she needs one. You faking cheapskate." This went on for a good amount of time. Finally, when it became clear I wasn't relenting, she grabbed her bawling kids and quiet as a mouse boyfriend and told them that shopping was over and exited the store. I was left standing in the middle of the aisle with this cart of stuff, shocked out of my gourd. I'm sure this will get lost, but I had to join Reddit for this one. My aunt, by marriage, came from a very wealthy family. Her parents died maybe 10 years ago, and she managed to steal half of the inheritance left to her deceased brother's 2 children. I'm not sure of the details, but yes, she stole from her own niece and nephew. From what I gather, they haven't spoken to my aunt since, and she doesn't understand how they could turn their back on the family. There are countless stories in the family about how cheap she is, but this is my favorite. I was still in college, and broke like most college students. For some holiday, I had driven over to my grandparents to meet the rest of the family. As we were all getting ready to leave, my aunt asked my grandmother for gas money. I was flabbergasted. This woman is worth millions, and she wanted gas money? My sainted grandmother looked shocked, but still handed over $20. She then turned to me and asked if I wanted some money. I very loudly told my grandmother that I could always afford to come see her. Last summer, my aunt and uncle hosted a family reunion at their house. This was their idea, mind you. So about 20 of us show up, hungry and ready to have some fun. That is getting drunk, the one activity we all seem to enjoy together. My aunt made one small crock pot of chili. That was it. No chips, no finger foods, no soda or beer, nothing. My father was so pissed, he ordered something like 15 pizzas to feed us all. My cousin made some calls and next thing I know, got us a keg delivered. My aunt also caused a major scene a couple Christmases ago over a reusable shopping bag. She wanted to make sure she got it back. I never leave my purse unattended when she's around. I'm convinced she'd raid my wallet in a heartbeat. Edited. I almost forgot about the chili incident. My boss at my old summer job back in college was one of the cheapest guys on the face of the earth. It was kind of a running joke in the office, how cheap he was, and how he never realized that it made him look weird. We all felt kind of bad, because his mother raised him that way and he didn't seem to know any better. His job had a decent salary, so it's not like they needed every penny they could get. After my first summer there, he took me out for dinner as a little thank you before I left for school. He took me to some diner and told me to keep it under $9. This is also the reason he went on plenty of first dates. but rarely got a second date. Another time a group of us from work decided to go out for Chinese and invite friends and family along. He brought his mother, and the two of them ordered the cheapest things on the menu and no appetizers. Since it was Chinese food, of course everybody shared their food with everyone else, so when the bill came it was kind of a mess figuring out who owed what. My stepfather suggested that we all split the bill evenly. The mother gave my stepfather such a death stare. It wasn't an expensive restaurant, so the difference for them was probably only a few dollars. On top of that, they were more than happy to try the appetizers when they were being passed around. My father took us, being his wife, my stepsister, her fiance, and myself, to dinner about a year ago. We were starving, but we had to wait until we went to eat anywhere because the fiance wasn't hungry. He kept saying that because the last time they came to visit, he said he was going to take us to a huge fancy diner because my dad was always the one paying. We finally went to eat at a nice restaurant, but still, nothing too crazy expensive. We all order our meals, and when the waiter arrives to take his order, he says they're faking bat him, "I'll have a taco." I know the order comes with 5, but I just want one because I'm not even hungry. The waiter stares at him in disbelief, but agrees to his demand and takes off. He also ordered plain water. The dinner went off without a problem until it came time to pay. My dad, knowing what is going to happen, but still curious as to what this dipshit is going to do, doesn't move a muscle. We all stare at the fiance, waiting for him to pick up the tab. He tries to pass it off to my dad, but my stepsister stops him and reminds him of his promise. He loses his sheet and throws what I can only describe as a 4-year-old's tantrum. He just keeps repeating, "But why should I pay for everything they ate? I only had one taco," over and over again. They start arguing and this goes on for around 2 minutes until I finally pay the tab. My dad was furious. Also, they just got married like 3 months ago, and I didn't go to the wedding because I won tickets to see Rammstein. Fuck yeah. While working as a waitress at IHOP, I've come across some pretty cheap beaches, but one of them really takes the cake in this department. 3 high schoolers came and sat in my section and ordered 3 full meals, including drinks. There was a couple, a guy and a girl, and the girl's friend, who sat across from them. They all pulled out their wallets to pay, and the guy said, "No, it's alright ladies. I'll handle this." He then proceeds to pay for the entire meal with his credit card, and I'm thinking, okay, a really sweet high schooler with money. Maybe he's also kind enough to realize how bad it sucks that I only get paid $2.15 an hour, and he'll tip me well. Ahem. No, he did not. He straight up looked at me and said, "Look, lady, I'd love to tip you, but I'm trying to save my money." I kind of stared at him with my head cocked to one side, said, "Okay," and walked off. His girlfriend hit him and left a $1 tip. To be fair, most high schoolers I've encountered, contrary to popular belief, tip really well. I've had a table of 4 tip me $4 to $5 each for their meals. So it's not a valid stereotype, at least from what I've seen. But this kid's douchebaggery, I mean, if you're trying to save money, why go out to eat in the first place? And on top of that, offering to pay for everyone who was willing to pay for themselves. Jeez. I worked at a pizza shop for a while and saw some pretty interesting things. We would have people order a pizza, then once it was done and we went to ring them up, they'd say, "Oh, I don't have any money." Then when we started walking back to put the pizza under the warmer, they'd get upset and say things like, "What? I don't get my pizza." We had people all the time that would come back saying the pizza was horrible and they want a refund. We'd open the box and there would be a slice or two left. Sometimes it'd be completely empty. One guy was a few dollars short and just grabbed a few bucks out of our tip jar to cover the rest. The manager said a few colorful things and kicked him out. We had a few that would come up trying to get someone else's order along the lines of, "Yeah, I ordered a pepperoni pizza, but I forgot the name I said for it." Then they'd get upset and say they paid already when we don't charge until the food is picked up. The owner of the small chain I worked at was a cheap as cokehead as well. This was Houston, Texas, and our account didn't work. It was all open, no wall between the customer area and kitchen, so they could see us throwing the dough and all that. It'd be over 120 degrees in the summer, and one of us would have to stand next to a huge oven pulling pizzas out. There was no heating, as well, and even with space heaters, that we had to buy, since he wouldn't. It was in the 50s during the winter. We were not scheduled for overtime. We were scheduled for 40-hour weeks, since the owner didn't want to pay out. On busy nights, the fast workers like me would be asked to stay past that 40-hour mark, so sometimes we'd end up with up to 45 hours for the week, which showed on the computer when we clocked out every day. Somehow, it'd end up as 40 hours when we got our checks. The owner would manually go in and take the time off. He had multiple lawsuits in the works going back over a year for this. There's a lot more, but that's what I can remember right now. I'm so late in this, but my ex was seriously the cheapest person to ever live. He refused to ever pay for drinks at restaurants, would instead order water, then ask me to carry in a can of pop, so he could drink it with his meal. He would reuse a McDonald's cup to get free fountain pop there, since it's free refills. I don't think their policy says anything about free refills for life though. He would buy a coffee at Starbucks, dump one half of it, then fill it with milk, and tell me he got me all that. He would plan a meal, go to the grocery store to buy it, and then change what he was going to make, just because one thing he wanted wasn't on sale, or he would just omit it from the recipe. He would rate things like sugar packets, ketchup packets, honey packets, etc. from fast food places, so that he didn't have to buy any condiments, ever. He also brought napkins home from Wendy's to use as toilet paper. He would say he was being romantic by cooking me dinner all the time, but it was really just a refusal to ever go out, even if we split the bill. The few times we did go out for dinner, he would never order a nap, dessert, or a drink. If I ordered any of these, he would purposefully add it to my half of the bill and only pay for his entree. He would borrow his parents' car, but only put in enough gas as he thought he would use. We had to push the car out of an intersection one day because we were running on fumes. He would sign up for credit cards for free stuff, then use this stuff as presents. Basically anything he received for free, like shirts at sports games, would become gifts, carefully handed out, so that the person he was giving it to didn't suspect it. He would bring a bottle of the cheapest booze to every house party, then proceed to drink all the good stuff. Then, if there was anything left in the cheap bottle at the end of the night, he would bring it home with him. He refused to buy a new jacket for himself, or really any nice clothing. Eventually his mom, or me, would be the ones to buy him stuff, because we were frustrated with him looking like a bum. When we took vacations, he would figure out cheap ways of making meals in the rooms, such as capo soup, instead of getting takeout. He would wait until the next version of something came out, like a phone, then get the old version off someone, so he never had to pay for a phone or other common electronic device. He would collect handfuls of soaps/shampoo/conditioners from maid carts when he was at a hotel, then use these exclusively, faking squeezing the tiny bit of crap generic conditioner out of one of those bottles is actually what finally broke me. Ugh. There are more, but I can't even think of them right now. This was over 5 years ago. I should add that his parents were very well off and paid for his schooling, and he had jobs all through uni, so was actually fairly well off. So many from my college roommate and best friend. He's driving and I'm the passenger. I notice his fuel gauge is on the E, which means he's in single digits for miles left. I tell him you really need to stop and get gas. He says he knows, and he's looking for a gas station. We drive for miles and pass several. I tell him he needs to stop at the next one. He says it's not cheap enough. Finally, after several miles he stops at one that he finds satisfactory. It's 10 cents cheaper than the first one we passed. He proceeds to put in 3 gallons of gas in for a total savings of 30 cents. I could have killed him. Friends came down for Mardi Gras, and the day after there was nothing to do, so we just went to the mall. Being poor college students, they rode the bus down, which was a 16-hour ride. As the food court is closing, they all decide to eat as much as they can right at that moment, since the bus ride back is so long. The only place still selling food is Sparrow, so they all buy the rest of the pizza, so they won't be hungry on the bus. All except for my best friend, who decides that $3 a slice is more than what pizza costs in Boston. So he turns down the only food option he'll have for the next 20 hours or so to save the $1 a slice he felt was being overcharged. Until I finally convinced him that he looked like a homeless person. All of his clothes were hand-me-downs from friends. He literally never spent money on clothes. And not all older friends only ate once a day at the buffet-style cafeteria. He would order 4 burgers and 2 chicken breast patties. No buns. The same order every day. If he didn't finish it, he'd put it in Tupperware to bring home with him. They changed the rule in the cafeteria that you could only order 2 grill items at a time. Because of him, so many more that I can't think of at the moment. TLDR roommate didn't help stereotypes against Jewish people. Oh, my dad for sure. He's on a whole other level of cheapness to anyone else I have ever met. A full description is not possible. For that you would need to know him. Bullet points will have to suffice. Point: has never purchased salt/pepper. Will always take a handful of each from a McDonald's. When he gets low, will go out of his way to go to a McDonald's in order to get a fresh supply. Will unashamedly get fresh supply without even ordering from their point. Buys things that are special in bulk, even if he doesn't like whatever it is. Weird chutneys with flavors he doesn't even like. Better get 10 bottles. They're on special. Point: refuses to replace any household tool/implement until it has disintegrated from overuse. I do a lot of garden work for him. His back got messed up a few years back, and he can't really do it himself, and I frequently use tools that his father gave him. I'm talking about a 50, 60 plus year old shovel/hoe/etc. If there's any interest, I think I have pics of some of this stuff on my phone I might be able to dig up. Collects cans, soda cans for you Americans, for recycling. Sounds reasonable enough. Heaps of people collect cans and do a trip once a year to those recycling places that pay you for the old cans. My dad goes once a month. Anywhere he's walking, if he sees a can discarded on the ground, he will pick it up, regardless of how many people can see him. I once witnessed him stop his car at a set of green lights in a major intersection just to open his door, reach out and pick up an empty can. I shit you not. Point: there's more than this, but I think you get the idea. I had a pretty bad infection in my armpit once. Pus for days, unbearable pain, inability to put arm aside, etc. etc. I didn't go to the doctor. That would cost a copay of $12, my mother said. Instead, she went to a friend who knows an RN elsewhere in the city to get me some antibiotics. Never mind the unknown nature of my infection, or whether or not I may be allergic to them, which, luckily I wasn't. Sulfur. She also, at the behest of a nurse her friend knows, decides to just lance out this abomination in my armpit. It was the longest week of my life, and could have been solved with 12 measly dollars. My brother had a dental appointment a year ago. He got his first cavity. $30 fix. No dice. Sister Darlie needed braces that we wouldn't pay for, cause you know, insurance. Nope. Brother got 2 more cavities in a year. Nope. Point: got a new HD TV. Siblings and I were surprised as this is the first TV purchase in almost 2 decades. Refused to buy proper cables or even call the cable company to get a new cable box to get HD channels and sheet. Then they complain that they can't see HD channels in HD. Point: our family has a history of dandruff. It ranges from barely noticeable to snowy mountains. Parents refuse to buy anti-dandruff shampoo/conditioner unless it's on sale. We currently have frizzy to straight shampoo/conditioner in the bathrooms. We're Asians, man. I have a few, some which make me furious when I think about them. Point: my aunt used to only flush her toilet once a day. She also put a brick into the back of the toilet to reduce the flow, because flushing water was like flushing her money down the drain. Edit. Since my friend from college reminded me. Point: when I was a college senior, I roomed with 2 other people in an apartment. One of the guys, let's call him Grisha, used an absurd amount of toilet paper. According to him, even stuff like orange juice gave him diarrhea. He used a lot and never bought any, relying on me or the other roommate to pay for his toilet expeditions. About March or so that year, 2006, other roommate and I decided to stop allowing Grisha to waste all the toilet paper. So we decided to keep toilet paper in our own rooms and bring it with us as needed. The toilet paper roll holder was empty for the next few months, and one day Grisha asked me what I was doing about the toilet paper situation. I told him I use the bathrooms at school, and he told me he used paper towels instead of going out to buy toilet paper, and PT costs more than TP. The cheapness that made, and still makes me angry. My cousin and another cousin's wife go to get free presents at Christmas events held by the Salvation Army for poor and disadvantaged kids. When I got angry at them, they said they weren't like me, they were poor. Between their two families, they own full luxury cars, have expensive homes, have multi-thousand-dollar purses, and cheat on their taxes to get free healthcare from the state. TLDR, my relatives steal presents from actual poor children. Rich people are often the cheapest people. They check their receipts for everything, count their change when they receive it, and things like that I never even care enough to do. I've determined that I will never be rich because I just don't care enough about money. I've also observed that people who are cheap are usually the ones that won't hesitate to call a manager to try and get someone in trouble. It's a personality trait. We all put in $5 at work for a lotto pool and ended up winning only 38 cents. I, like most people, couldn't care less and didn't ask for my change back. I told the person it was for their effort collecting and organizing the pool. This one lady whom I hate asked for her 38 cents back when the pool organizer said I've only got quarters. The other lady said it's okay, I've got change. That lady is really bothersome. She does a ton of cheap shit. When did a company pizza day where everyone pitched in and we bought like 10 pizzas at $5 each? She ate 3 slices, calculated how many slices per pizza, and demanded money back for the pizza she didn't eat. I've taken to being quite passive aggressive towards her. I was giving out gum and she asked if she could have a piece and I charged her 25 cents for it. Everyone was laughing, but I was dead serious and made her cough up 25 cents. I then told her I was going to donate that 25 cents to Mitt Romney just to piss her off. I have a former classmate from college. Holy shit, it's gonna feel good to get this in writing. This kid's family is loaded. I'm talking in the triple-digit billions. His father owns several biotech companies and related commercial projects. And while I hate to use the term, it is very clearly new money. Money is spent very clearly to demonstrate how much they have, regardless of utility. Their home is something out of Cribs. Huge driveway, high ceilings, expensive fixtures and ornaments, TVs everywhere, but it's not really a livable space. Floor space isn't utilized well. There aren't many rooms, just a lot of open areas that are only useful for entertaining. The home is 2 stories, a ground level and a basement, which has an enormous bar fully stocked with top shelf liquor, and is at least 4k square feet. Needless to say, they own multiple luxury vehicles, more than there are members of the immediate family, none of which are more than a few years old. Both this kid and his father love to talk about how well connected they are, and they love even more to show it off. For spring break my senior year, he took a dozen or so of his friends, including me, all of us male, to Vegas for an almost all expense paid trip. He flew us out there. We were put up in suites in one of the best hotels on the strip, and he somehow managed to get us tables multiple times at very popular clubs. We, the rest of the group, later conclude that this whole endeavor is simply a front to get him laid for the first time, but that's a story for a different time. Yet somehow this kid is Asperger's level clueless and offensively cheap. He never tips, ever. While dining out, he has regularly left friends embarrassed about how he has left maybe a $2 tip on a $30 bill, leaving them to cover for his portion. He regularly eats fast food because he doesn't want to spend money, and his health is pretty abysmal. The food in his house is very typical cheap yet caloric Walmart fare, with little in the way of produce or health food. He constantly hounds you about ridiculously small amounts of cash. Borrow $2 for a soda, and you won't hear the end of it until he gets that money back. This attitude was reflected in Vegas. The second night we're there, his dad dumps at least 10 grand on a table and booze at one club, and becomes buddy with some promoter or manager there. I don't know, this really isn't my scene, It's the first, and probably only time in my life I've ever experienced anything like this, and frankly I'm reluctant to do it again, even if presented with the opportunity. Using this new connection, he is able to get us a table at another club with no cover, and one of our group convinces him to buy a bottle, so he doesn't completely piss off, or fuck over his contact. He buys exactly one. I guess occupying a table when you're not dumping cash is bad manners, because the waitstaff were not too happy with him. He was blissfully oblivious to me. It seems surreal and kind of arrogant that I'm talking about being cheap when it comes to $600 bottles of vodka at expensive nightclubs. But again, this is a totally different world to me, and apparently this is how it works. But it gets better. We all attended a top 15 private university in the US, and needless to say tuition and fees are pretty high. The school is nominally need blind, but available funds stuck ahead during the 2008 recession and belts were tightened across the board. But get this, his father, through some creative accounting practices, declared him legally independent, which has resulted in him getting a full ride the entirety of his enrollment. One consequence of being declared legally independent is that he cannot be covered under his parents' insurance, which his dad got resolved by making him an employee of one of his companies. So for 3 years, he graduated in 3, he has paid next to nothing to go to school. He cheated his way through most of it, wasn't really a remarkable student, but somehow ended up with a decent GPA. On top of that, he is now applying to medical schools, and is fabricating a history of volunteer work, to be substantiated by his dad's peers. He's applying to top 20 schools, and for somebody who did next to no work as an undergraduate, the thought of him becoming a doctor terrifies me. It actually terrifies many of us, and is very much the last straw. We are looking to collect evidence of falsification, to distribute to the schools he's applying to, as well as the MCAT point. I have many stories about this kid's scumminess and unparalleled sense of entitlement that don't pertain immediately to being cheap, but those are for another time. My girlfriend's best friend was about to be secretly proposed to. The guy had my girlfriend and her circle of friends help plan a dinner on the night of the proposer's birthday. It was a 7-course meal which goes for about $200 per head. The guy invites the girls and some other close friends to join the dinner, somehow giving everyone the impression that he was going to foot the bill. Cool point. After they had made all the arrangements and did all the groundwork for the party, it took days to plan. He broke it to them that it'll be Dutch. Everyone has to pay for their own dinner. Obviously the girls freak out. Not all of them can afford $200, especially on some snooty dinner. After a lot of thought, they decide to go through with it anyways. It was going to be their best friend's special night and they wanted to be there. Some of the other guests, upon learning, understandably bowed out. Okay. So night of the dinner, $200 aside, everything seems to be going okay. At the end of the dinner, however, he shamelessly approaches the girls, the ones who helped organize, to foot about an additional $40 each. When they asked why, he replied it was for the elaborate birthday cake which went to feed about 30 or so odd guests. He maintains that as the organizing committee they should have to share this cost, and it would be a good present to the new bride-to-be anyways. Oh my god, they think. But pay anyway, because they didn't want to create a scene. My girlfriend had to cover for some of the other girls. Here's the thing. This guy drives a $200K car. His house is a freaking mansion. I can't wrap my head around how friggin' cheap this guy is. Oh, and the poor bride-to-be, the engagement ring was something like a bad grade 0.3 carat Tiffany 1A ring. It was absolutely tiny compared to the diamond ring she was wearing that night, which was handed down to her by her mom. She took it off, her mom's ring, at the end of the dinner, because people who were walking up to congratulate her would confuse the rings and give a sorta sad face upon realizing the tiny one was her engagement ring. Everyone knew how loaded this guy's was, and to top it off, he proudly announced how smart he was to propose on her birthday so as to save money by combining her birthday present into the engagement ring. I'd like to introduce Reddit to my friend Mark. This will get buried, but man, it's a red. Mark is a Quebec French, English speaking friend of mine who suffers from AD. Within my group of friends, Mark is simply known as the Jew. Here are some of my friend Mark's cheap highlights. He purchases child movie tickets. Despite being 24, in order to save a few bucks when seeing a movie, he always orders water wherever he goes, and it damn well be free or else he won't want it. He'll complain about ordering food because it costs money, and then will sit there asking endlessly for pieces of your meal, or if you're done eating it, so he can finish the rest. Regardless of the situation, I could be dying from stab wounds. Mark will bug you later on about paying him for using his gas money to drive you around. Mark would rather drive 24 hours straight than pay any sort of money on hotel accommodations. This leads to dangerous trips where he likes to fall asleep. Mark loves to borrow stuff. Going camping, he'll want to sleep in your tent. Having a party, he'll show up and help you eat your food. Have a cooler for your drinks for the drive up. Oh, just let him put some stuff in there cause he doesn't want to bring his. Mark refuses to pay for dates. Go anywhere expensive. Trying to pick a restaurant is a faking pain, and always looks for the cheapest route of transport. I have more, but I think this is a fair amount. It doesn't help that he doesn't understand why some people get mad at him for doing such things. My mom is a retired accountant and is the stingiest person with everything. Here is a list. Crushes cans and recycles them for money on a bi-weekly basis. If one can goes uncrushed, she loses massive amounts of sleep over it. Saves pennies, counts them out until she has $1, sorts them into bags, pays for her entire meal at Wendy's with bags of them. Steals those short cardboard boxes at grocery stores to make litter boxes with. Has a toaster oven from the 70s in which the button is pushed and pops up when it is done. The button no longer has the capability of popping up, so she sits there for 5 to 10 holding it down and reading the newspaper. I have never seen my mother buy clothes in the 22 years that I have been alive. Ever. She does, however, accept any and all free shirts and still wears shirts she received as a Girl Scout leader back in the 90s. She refused to get a U-Haul when moving a twin-sized mattress and box spring and instead tied it to the top of her Honda Accord and went 40 miles per hour on the freeway, a 25-mile drive. She has bought me enough razors on senior day at the grocery store to last me through the zombie apocalypse. This is just a slight glimpse at my eccentric mother. She refuses to be stingy when it comes to food, however. She enjoys the expensive buffets at the Indian casinos here in Az. My mom bought a bookcase from Walmart because she didn't have any space for her books. Something like $5. It wasn't even a sheety press board. It was like blown plastic, and not plastic garage shelving. It was a bookshelf looking thing with plastic shelves and plastic risers. She put it together and put some books on it. One of the plastic risers promptly collapsed from the weight. She took the parts back to the store and got another one. What? I don't want to spend a lot of money on a bookcase. Put it together and put some books on it and it promptly collapsed from the weight. Repeat 4 faking times. She finally decided she was going to keep her bookcase and just not put anything heavy on it, like books. I, meanwhile, went to Target and bought one of their cheap bookcases for $10, which is at least what she spent on gas driving back and forth to Walmart on sale, and dropped it off at home. It holds books, surprisingly enough. And guess who gets cheat years later for spending all that money on that bookcase I didn't need? My dad used to pack his glove compartment with napkins and condiment packets from various restaurants. You want ketchup? Heh, fuck buying a bottle from the man. Here's a 10-year-old Heinz packet. What do you mean you don't want ketchup anymore? Do you need a paper towel? Heh, fuck buying a roll from the man. Go grab some of those decades-old napkins from the car, the ones that are visibly brittle and won't absorb anything because they've been in a car since the 80s. What are you using all those napkins for? And before the white knight defenders ride in, no, we are not poor. Need to use a throwaway for this one. I had a boss many years ago who was extremely cheap in some of the strangest ways. Not only was he really cheap, but this guy was exceptionally loaded. I'm talking about 3 houses, a 48-foot boat, 2 planes, 6 or 7 cars, and owned a huge construction company. Even with all this money, he would go to the bank once every other week and get rolls of nickels. When he would commute to work every day, he would use them in the toll booths. He was driving up from the Jersey Shore and I think he had about 4 tolls total. Rather than pay the 25 cents or so for the toll, he would toss in a nickel. Anyone who has driven the Garden State Parkway knows that when you have trouble with the automated coin machines, you beep your horn and another toll taker will pop the gate. He would drive up, pop the nickel and wait 10 seconds. Beep the horn, and then go through. He did this for about 8 years before they finally caught him. The cops had been looking for him for a while. Because of his many cars, they had trouble tracking him down. They fined him rather heavily for all the abuse. I have no idea how much he was fined, but it wasn't pretty. After that, he drove the very long way to bypass most of the tolls. I imagine he paid more in gas. It never made any sense. Here is the kicker. He expensed all of his tolls and gas. It was his business, so it never came out of his pocket. Also, half of his cars were paid for by the company. Why nickels? None of us could ever understand that part. First time posting. I'll try to keep it short, but here goes. I was in Sri Lanka with some friends, and we met up with another group of people there, and went for dinner at a pub. Since there were 12 of us, we were asked if we could split the bill. This put a person from Chicago on my table, with me and a few others. Another bloke, who I'll call Colorado, anonymity is best for me for a few reasons, was up on the next table. Now, midway through our meal, Colorado orders another jug of water. This was equivalent to 70 cents. At the end, we all paid for our own stuff. College students, now, and discovered we were a few rupees short, equivalent to the bottle of water, which had shown up on our bill. I've paid exactly my amount, and can't break anymore without breaking a large bill, and Chicago has put extra money in, because he doesn't have the right amount of change. He then asks Colorado for the 70C, who is kind of stumped and just says, "Oh, what? I'll buy you a drink later, I guess." Kind of dismissive, because let's face it, it's 70 faking cents. Anyway, later, we head to another pub and Chicago requests a $4 beer, and then turns to Colorado, and says, "You're paying for this, right?" Amazed all of us. He's also the type of guy who shows up to parties I throw. I've spent hundreds of bucks on alcohol over the semester, and alcohol is super cheap where I live. I'm talking $20 for a crate of decent beer, and when I ask him to pitch in a bit, he gives me $5. And that would be a kind of once in every few weeks sort of thing. If I ask more than once, fat cheap people, they get on my nerves. Like other posters, I also have worked in the service industry, and it has warped me into someone who really dislikes cheap people. Being frugal and smart with money is fine, but being cheap and expecting everything for free is another story. I have more stories of people being cheap than I can even count. I can't even choose my worst one. If there is interest, I will post more than the ones below. One time I had a group of 7, 2 parents and 5 kids. I got the impression that the kids were a mix of their own children and their friends. They were kinda rude during the whole meal, but that didn't bother me so much, because they had a high check. It was $116.XX. The kids were literally chugging their root beers and yelling for my attention for refills, and the parents did nothing to control them, which is usually a major red flag. Each kid drank at least 3 root beers and a couple had 5+. Like I said though, this doesn't bother me much, because it's my job. I gave them service with a smile all the way through dinner, and when the food was dropped I made sure everything was to their liking. They ordered a ton of food, appetizers and then meals for everyone, including a couple steaks. One kid had a $23.95 ribeye, and this kid cleaned his plate off. He ate the fat, the garnish, everything. A good eater. As I'm clearing the plates away, the father tells me that his son didn't like his steak. I laugh because I figure he is being sarcastic, as people love to do in restaurants when they clear their whole plate off. He looks at me and he says, "No, I'm serious. The steak wasn't good, it was tough and rubbery." Slightly baffled, I apologized about his steak and asked if he wanted to tell the manager, to which he said, "Yes, actually I would like to." I bring the owner over, and the guy argues with him back and forth about how he shouldn't have to pay for a steak that his kid didn't like. But seriously, how the fuck are you going to complain when your kid cleaned the plate off? The owner says the best he can do is buy them dessert. The guy declined rudely and said, "Okay, I'll just have to never come back here again." Check was $116.XX. This faker handed me $120 and told me to keep the change. Cheap as holes. My high school was a pretty prestigious school in my neck of the woods. It is literally owned by the first lady of Middle Eastern nation, the oil-ridden ones, and needless to say she would donate millions in the school's name for diabetes and children's hospitals and such. Needless to say, the school was backed up and loaded. For 4 years I was part of the soccer team that won several trophies and was undefeated in its invitational tournament. So we were a pretty sweet team. They made us pay for our uniforms, full price, and then return them at the end of the season. They wouldn't even have us wear our own damn white socks. We had to wear their $20 socks for like 10 games and give them back. Even if you were a regular and wanted the same jersey number, you had to buy the same damn shirt again. Bought the number 11 shirt 3 times. Same short, same awful socks for 3 years. After winning the championship and graduating, they wouldn't let us keep our damn uniforms. The girls' basketball team got to fly out to other countries to play in championships and lose, where the guys who would bring home the silverware every year have to cover the cost of the bus taking us to other schools. Nothing against our girls, they fought bravely. It's just the injustice of it all. 5 years since my class graduated, most of the team were in my class, and the school hasn't won a single soccer trophy. Not even with their fancy new Nike deal. Bastards had it coming. TLDR school made me pay for the same soccer uniform 3 years in a row. Not an extreme example, just felt like a as soon as possible-ish move. In the movie and gaming store I work in, we are currently giving coupons for 2 free rentals to customers who don't have an account yet, to try to bring in some much needed rental business. They just have to make an account, no cost and no obligations, a genuine free lunch. We don't advertise the coupons and aren't allowed to give them to people who explicitly ask for them, but I sometimes do it anyway. We have a coupon taped to the register monitor to have the barcode at hand. Last week, while a guy was renting 3 movies, his buddy leaned over the counter from the side, spotted the coupon, and asked me what it was. Not thinking, as I was busy ringing up his friend's rental, I told him. He nagged for one. I said I wasn't really supposed to, but okay, thinking he would use it later. He wanted to create the account right away, so I made him one, even though he had no ID with him, and asked him to bring some next time. He then said, well, we only need 2 movies, then made his friend cancel his rentals and used his own. Left with a big fat "what a crafty life hacker I am" smirk on his face point. So I made a note on his account to sell up maximum, so he'll never leave the store without having every extra offer shoved down his throat. I also didn't give him the additional coupon for 50% off his next 2 rentals. Haha. Somehow I doubt he'll ever be a paying customer, though. TLDR. Screwing over your friendly video store clerk doesn't pay. There have ways of making you mildly annoyed. Seriously, who walks around with no ID, not even a credit card? At least 1/4 of the customers I ask have nothing on them. I had the pleasure of having unbelievably cheap floor mats in college. I have nothing against this at all. One was Jewish, and he constantly was exchanging ideas with my other Chinese friend about how they could save money. I love them both, and I bet both of them would laugh at these experiences I'm about to share. He would roll up his toothpaste container until the very last drop, and then cut the container open with scissors, and scrub his toothbrush to get every last drop of toothpaste in the container. He would also take his laptop and cell phone to the university library, which is a 3-minute bike ride away, to charge them, because he didn't know utilities were included in the monthly dorm fees. Instead of using shampoo and soap for showering, he would squirt a large amount of the hand soap from our communal sinks to use for bathing. He would actively check what lockers were open so he could use another student's deodorant sprays. Instead of buying a towel, he would use the disposable paper towels in our communal bathrooms to dry himself. After bathing, he would always ask me for condoms because he didn't want to pay for them. Even though students get huge discounts, his parents gave him a Lacoste polo and he always hung it up in his room with the tags still on in plain sight for everyone to see, and never wore it because he felt it was some sort of memorabilia. There are so many more stories, but these are the first that come to mind. I bought a really nice pair of new rock boots for $300, and as the metal fittings got scratched up and broke apart, they turned out to be cheap plastic. When I tried getting the fittings replaced, New Rock was not at all cooperative. Fortunately, a third-party retailer, I forget which, or I'd endorse them, tried to help out by sending me replacement fittings for the front of the boot free of charge. But unfortunately, the fittings they sent me weren't the right ones for the boot, and by the time they arrived, the rear fittings were also falling apart, too. I did subcontract tech support for Dell. Dell had hired companies like Unisys to do the support work. Unisys hired companies like Apex and TCML to hire the actual technicians. One of the companies hired me. While doing this work, I discovered a few things. Unisys' office, I think it was in Lyndhurst, New Jersey, was usually locked and therefore impossible to get into because they had very few actual employees who rarely ever needed to be in the office. If we didn't want to waste a lot of time waiting to get into the office, we could do the admin work from home, but Unisys was not very cooperative towards reimbursing expenses, paper, ink, etc. While I learned pretty quickly that Unisys was lowballing the technical staffing agencies by playing them off each other, when a colleague and I showed up at one particular job, we realized Dell was doing the same thing. Since there was another tech there for Dell who wasn't out of Unisys, I forget who sent him. I was being paid about $13 per hour. After I stopped working for them, I picked up a technical director job. When TCML, or maybe it was Apex, called me asking me if I was still looking for work, I was actually looking for workers. I flipped the question on them and asked how much it would cost to get some workers from them. I was informed that entry-level employees would make $28 per hour per worker. By the way, I wasn't entry-level. Everyone must have a friend like this in their lifetime, right? Those friends that buy everything they want, but when it comes time to do something in a group or for someone else, it's always "oh, I'm broke." Most recently, I had a friend who said he couldn't afford a wedding gift for our mutual friend because he was obviously broke. 1 week later, he's talking about his brand new PS3. When I call him out on it, he stammers and says it's a present from his dad. I know this kid is an only child to a rich family and they give him things he asks for. If it was me, I would have asked for money as a present, so I could at least spend some money on a present and pocket the rest. Back in the day, I had a good friend who would buy $100 sweaters, but couldn't afford to eat at Panda Express because she's poor. Well, we kind of grew apart, but she still invited me to her birthday to go wine tasting. It's 3 hours away, so I end up spending a good $100 on gas, winneries throughout the day, and pitching in for dinner. During one of the winneries, she busts out a new LV bag she got in France and brags about how she just had to splurge when she was in Paris. 1 month later it's my birthday, and I invite her to come to an overpass eating/drinking/hangout party in a cabin, where it'll cost about $30 a person. Can you guess what she said? She is broke, so she can't go. She works, lives with her parents, and does not pay rent. She isn't anywhere near broke. I'm on a cruise with my mom and C's. We were visiting places along the coast in Mexico. I hung out with kids my age, around 13 to 15, and there was one girl there with just her mom. She seemed nice, but I thought they were both a little weird, but whatever. A day or so later, we dock and everyone's getting ready to go on shore. The mom of this girl was talking to a couple that day, and when we were getting ready to walk off, the mom was thanking the woman of the couple for hanging out with her and her daughter. We get back on the boat later on, and I realize they hung out the entire day. The mom keeps chatting these people up, and the next docking, she goes on shore with the same couple. The daughter stays back to do kids activities. The mom comes back later, and is thanking the couple for buying her stuff. I then realize this woman is scamming them. The next day or so, the couple aren't around now, and this woman is now chatting up another couple. Same story as I'd heard parts of before. She said she had gotten robbed, or lost it, as she went back and forth with, and all her money and ids were gone. This is before passports are required to go to Mex. That she would be so grateful if they'd hang out with her, and help her out. So, the second couple scammed. They didn't hang out with her after that docking. I then noticed no couples would talk to her anymore, so then I saw her trying to get men to buy her stuff on board, while her daughter sat there embarrassed and humiliated. They couldn't afford to even go on shore the next docking. The mom didn't have the money. I still wonder if she got someone to buy their tickets for the cruise, seeing as she didn't have any money to be on board anyway. TLDR, scummy mom scams other tourists, so she won't have to spend any money on her and daughter's vacation. I worked at Harbor Freight Tools for a while as a cashier. One day I was ringing some lady who was a complete beach. I said, "Hi, how are you today?" And the beach returns it with a dirty look. I asked for the zip code and she gave me some town zip code that's like 20 miles away. Why she traveled so far to go to a Harbor Freight I'll never know. So she's a beach. Whatever, she only has a few items. She'll get out of the door quick point. So I ring up those few items, and each item has a coupon to go along with it. Except for one that was a roll of tape that was $2.99. I finish the transaction and she goes, I forgot my 20% coupon. Do you have any extras? Now at my Harbor Freight all we do with the coupons people give us is put it in the trash under the register. You can use those coupons over and over again if you want to. Cashiers just aren't supposed to, but if someone's nice, I'll give it to them if they ask. I was not giving this beach any coupons. I tell her no, we don't have any in the store. The only thing you could have used it on is the tape anyways, but that's only going to save you like 50 cents. You can always come back and adjust it if you find a coupon. She rolls her eyes, takes her bag, and is finally out of the door. Next day she comes back with her coupon and the receipt, complaining how she had to drive all the way back here because we don't carry any coupons in the store. What place does? I completely ignore her as she's talking a mile a minute, finish the price adjustment, and loudly say, "Here's your 0.59 cents. Have a good day." She shuts up, takes her 0.59 cents, and leaves. TLDR, beachy customer wastes who knows how much in gas to drive to my store to price adjust something that ends up saving her only 0.59 cents. I was the best man for my buddy's wedding, which, of course, means I get to plan the bachelor party. Unfortunately, I live halfway across the country earning my PhD. He is in Texas working for NASA. One of his friends decides to take the initiative, overstep his boundaries, and send out an email to everyone telling us what is happening for the bachelor party. Might as well copy pasta his itinerary for the big day. Party segment #1 setting. 12 p.m. at Hark Winery. What? Toasting bachelor. Games and wine. End. Circa 3:30. Wedding is kicking us out. Potluck dinner setting. 5:30 p.m. at Steve's place. What? Toasting and feeding bachelor. What you need to bring? A dish of your choosing. Please send me what you are inclined to provide, and I'll balance out the meal. You are welcome to prepare your dish at my house beforehand utilizing my way too big for me kitchen. End. Circa 7:30. Totally rad, but highly tasteful laughter party setting. 7:30 p.m. What? Stripper free merriment. Everyone is invited to stay after the dinner for activities like rock band, pool, games, socialization, Nerf wars, beer pong, etc. What you need to bring. All entertainment implements will be provided, but feel free to secure your favorite party supplies. Some booze will be provided, but please bring your favorite beverage. End. Never, or when we all pass out, whichever comes first. Please RSVP, specifying which activities you'll be able to attend, and the dish you'd like to prepare for the dinner. I need a head count, so that I can properly size the banquet table. The irony of a potluck dinner is that each of these guys make good money and have purchased 300, 600k homes, yet none would spend a dime on the bachelor. I ended up buying him a $200 dinner at a bomb steakhouse. I grew up in a pretty ghetto, but by HS I had a friend whose dad was a millionaire property owner. His family was actually pretty cool. They had many nice things of course, and had a full-time house staff, but they seemed down to earth, were always throwing free dinner parties, and the dad had a very relaxed attitude about everything. But the son, my friend, has a sort of warped sense of entitlement that I was never comfortable calling him out on. It was with everything. He would always expect me to buy snacks, lend him money and such stuff. But if we were ever out to lunch, and I had left my wallet in the car, instead of lending me $20 for me to pay for my meal, and then give it back to him later that evening, he would have me walk all the way back to my car just to fetch the cash. I'm always good for money, because I live a pretty modest life and budget my modest income, even though it was under the national poverty line, but he would just never extend any of the same courtesy that he expected me to extend to him. I think he might have been a covert sociopath, or a shy psychopath or something. I decided that I don't want to have to call out my own friends for shit like this, so I stopped seeing him. It was almost like the Larry David character from Curb Your Enthusiasm, but I think I would have enjoyed the company of the Larry character much more. He was also kind of slow. Like if we were to go out, and he'd park somewhere, as we go to the ticket machine he would look at all the buttons, looked like he was concentrating hard for a moment, then decided to not worry about it, and just pay the $30 parking fine. $30 is what it costs for him to not have to deal with a machine for 10 seconds. I don't understand it at all, because the rest of his family was so normal. I guess that's probably why he was friends with someone like me actually, because he couldn't relate well to other people or they wouldn't tolerate him. My first web dev job out of college, I had a boss who was ridiculously cheap. He was one of those religions that doesn't believe in holidays, so if we wanted to take Christmas off to spend time with our families, we wouldn't get paid our daily wage. Also, his business was a franchise of a nationwide company that involved printing labels for the inside of cars on special labels. However, he had this cheap ass printer that damaged about a third of all printed labels. He never got the damn thing fixed because the national company reimbursed him like 3x the cost of each label. That messed up. The kicker was that one day he decided to go to Sam's Club and buy all sorts of snacks and sodas. If we wanted to have them, we had to pay, but at some ridiculous markup. My coworkers and I never did pay 75 cents for a 25-cent crackers and cheese pack, but he would always offer them to potential clients and hotshot salesmen he was hoping to hire for free. Plus, he would sometimes let us have them for free during our all-staff meetings. There were 6 of us, so he never made any money on them. He also tried charging the same price for companies to rent virtual office space from us that they would for a similar service in LA. Our city has about 1/20th the population and a glut of cheap office space, plus other services existed already that did more for cheaper. But nope, the price was still $199 a month for the super basic service, or whatever. Last I heard about 3 years ago, he had moved his pie in the sky business operation into the guest office of his mansion in the rich part of town on the golf course. That golf course has since been closed because he and his fellow residents didn't agree to a maintenance fee increase, and the land has been sold to housing developers. Had the housing bubble not burst there, he'd have a nice view of some other rich person's backyard instead of the 14th fairway. Now, he only sees overgrown grass and wedzo, and most of his brilliant business ideas flop miserably due to his own incompetence and inability to retain good people who knew what they were doing. I was one of them, but I knew I could do better, so I peaced out years ago. I'm always thankful for it. I'm a tool rental associate at a Home Depot located in a pretty rich area. Rented a 14-inch paver saw that takes a gas/oil to a customer who lives in an area it's safe to say he makes enough to qualify for the 1%. The rental with the blade was about $110. He rushed the crap out of me while I was renting the tool to him, so I started it for him and showed him how to put the blade on even though he had professionals doing the work. 20 minutes later he called up furious saying the tool was out of gas. He lives that close. I told him to bring it back and I would reset his time and fill the tank. He refused. Almost an hour and a half go by and he hasn't returned it yet. My coworker called to see if everything was alright with the tool. His wife answered and said they never had a problem and the workers finished the job and were cleaning up. She put a contractor on and he verified it didn't need gas. Customer brings back the tool furious, just puffed fire in his eyes and said that it was out of gas. We called the manager. The manager cut him off and told he what we did and he wouldn't get a discount, and the customer put his head down and looked like a dog who shit on the floor, then apologized for yelling at me on the phone. TLDR, rich snob didn't want to pay $110. We called his bluff and he paid. Probably buried, as this post is already on the front page, but here goes. I used to drive a limo in a swanky ski town. Think of one of the richest ski towns in America. There, I got this call from a Brazilian businessman and his family. They want a ride across town. The fare is $55 bucks. I bring him to the restaurant and drop him and the kids off. I'll let him know the fare, and he gave me a $100 bill. Obviously he needs change. I ask him how much he would like back, and he says, just 20. Just 20? Honestly? That means he gave me a $25 tip, just under 50%, which is freaking stellar. I drive off happy. An hour and a half later, dispatch calls. The same family wants a ride. I'm nearby, and thinking, hell yes. I'm going to swing in and charm them again, possibly earning another sweet tip. I drove him back to his hotel. Flat fare. $55 bucks. He gives me a 20 and a 10. I say, no, sir, I'm sorry, but the fare is $55 He responds, I already gave you 25 earlier. Not only did he stiff me, he took my previous tip to pay for the rest of his fare. So he stiffed me twice in one run. I politely tried to tell him that the other money was gratuity and that this was a separate fare, but as a limo driver, you gotta be delicate. I bit my tongue and I drove away. I worked in a grocery store for years. Worked my way through the depths, and so on point I saw the milkmaids from Clark's, which is actually really common in the grocery depth too. People know about rotation, so many will actually pull every can or box off a shelf just to get the one at the back, which is fucking annoying when you are the stock boy whose job it is to rotate and place on the shelf point anyways. The worst was in the meat department. I spent a year as a butcher. Our company had a policy where we would take a return on anything, even without a receipt, to keep the customer happy. Point I have sold people hams and turkeys days before Thanksgiving, only to have them come in a few days after Thanksgiving with a half-eaten turkey and receipt and ask for their money back. We gave them their money back and then threw it in the bone/fat can to be made into dog food and farm feed. That always amazed me. Some assholes, they would buy it raw, cook it, eat it down to the bone, and then return the fucking thing. Even more amazing, we would give them their money back. Point the craziest return I saw was for a tire. Some asshole brought in some used tires and a receipt and asked for their money back. We didn't sell tires. Apparently though, the store manager gave them 10% on the receipt and we threw them in the dumpster. Every year my close group of friends and I have a holiday potluck/secret Santa. Obviously we talk it out to see what day all of us are available. Anyways, one year we were all waiting on one person to arrive so we could get started. So I called the guy and he was on a date. Seriously? We set the date about a month ahead of time. So I tell him we are waiting on him and he goes, oh okay. He then arrives at the potluck with the leftover pasta from his date. My parents tried to haggle at Sears one time. Point in college, my brother rented a bedroom in a family's home. He wasn't allowed to turn on the sink because it was a waste of water. Instead, they had to use a bucket of water in the backyard to wash everything including their dishes. I used to work in the concession stand at a movie theater and I understand we could be a little pricey, but wow. There was one lady who ordered the smallest size of popcorn and I filled it all the way to the top till it was overflowing. She looks at it and asks, can I have some more? It's already filled all the way up. Can you put some more on the side? No, unless you want to order a bigger size. She walks away angrily. Also, our large popcorn is refillable as long as the refill tab is still attached. Point there is this one guy who comes every week and digs through the garbage to find refillable popcorn. Dirty. My ex-girlfriend and I went out to eat with her aunt, grandmother, and cousin. It was about an hour drive to the restaurant and my ex-girlfriend and I were meeting them there. I didn't mind at the time because I had just purchased a new car, important later, and wanted to drive it. Her family chose the luxurious establishment known as the Texas Roadhouse. During the meal they ordered several baskets of free rolls and pocketed them in their purses. At this point it was only logical that it would continue to go downhill. The aunt and cousin were amazed at how clean the bathroom was and that free mints were available. This resulted in an uncountable number of mints thrown into purses, pockets, and pictures taken of the bathroom. To corroborate this profound discovery, after watching one eat half of her plate and then notifying the waitress that it was the wrong meal and demanding another one, it was obvious that the waitress was growing more annoyed by the second. Finally, they asked for the bill and 2 go cups for their drinks, what the fuck, and made sure to clarify that I'm not on their tab. Total tab was around $40-$50 for all 5 of us. The next part was the worst part of the afternoon. The aunt paid with approximately 10 to 15 used gift cards, some of them only having 30 to 50 cents on them. And to top this off, no tip was left for the waitress. My ex-girlfriend and I were both speechless at how embarrassing her family was. I ended up leaving a $20 tip on my $8 meal and apologized to the waitress while walking out. We get to our cars and the aunt looks at me and says, "Don't you dare hit my car with your car door." I had a 04 feet Mazda RX-8. She drove what appeared to be the first Pontiac Vibe ever constructed. This literally started the breakup process of my ex-girlfriend of nearly 4 years and I. Yes, they were all from Ohio. Finally, there's a question I have a good answer for. I'm from a small town in rural Australia. It was booming back in the 50s, but it's pretty much just senior citizens living out there now. We moved there to be close to my nan. A lot of the senior citizens there were retired farmers living off their pensions. So I grew up around a lot of very thrifty people. By far the most amazing example of cheap I have ever seen in my life was an elderly gentleman named Ronnie. Ronnie's wife had died years back, and he had lived by himself for a long time in a farmhouse on a few acres. He was a regular at the Lawn Bowls Club, the only business left in town that was still booming for obvious reasons, and would always buy one beer, leave a small mouthful in the bottom, and then insist there was something in it, and demand a new one. He would then skulk around the people playing the pokey machines, slots, and when they won he'd congratulate them and say, "How about a celebratory drink?" If no one won any money he'd just go home. He was notorious for this. People made fun of him, and he would just shrug and say, "Nothing wrong with being careful with your dosh." My dad was the treasurer of the Bowls Club for a while, and at that time he remarked that the budget for the ladies' bathroom amenities was insane. More than any small country town bowls club should be spending. I'll come back to this. Ronnie died a few years ago, and because he had no family, it was up to his friends, the bowlers, to help pack up his stuff. They found a freezer full of used tea bags. Ronnie had been keeping them, rather than throwing them out because they've only been used once. They found his firewood pile, and were confused by it, because the logs all had nails in them. Then they realized that he had been driving his truck around, stealing a random fence post here and there to avoid having to pay for firewood. They were shocked, but even more gobsmacked, when they realized he hadn't had electricity connected in 14 years, because he was in bed before sunset most nights anyway, and he did his reading in the daytime. But the best find was in his hallway cupboard. He had close to 400 rolls of toilet paper in his hallway closet. He had been routinely going into the ladies' bathroom at the Bowls Club, getting into the storage cupboard under the sink, and sneaking a few rolls of toilet paper out at a time under his jacket. That tops it for me. Cheapest bastard I've ever known. And he reportedly had close to $50,000 in the bank when he died. I have a friend who is proudly cheap. One of his proudest talking points is that he loves going out to dinner with a date, but getting separate checks and using a coupon to discount his own meal. He genuinely does not have the ability to comprehend why so many of his dates, and people in general, find that to be a faux pas. My godfather was notoriously cheap. Every year for Christmas, rather than buy a tree for his family, he would go around to all the places selling Christmas trees and haggle for the branches and pieces of trees that couldn't be sold. He'd drag them all home and basically assemble what we all lovingly referred to as the Christmas shrub. One time he got a long log from his firewood, drilled holes in it, and stuck pine branches into the holes to fabricate his own tree. The end product always wound up looking like a squash tree, vaguely triangular, but squat and fat. Top. After decorations were done, always handmade by the family, almost always recycled from previous years, the tree invariably wound up looking pretty good. One other Godfather story from when I was a toddler. Both of our families went on vacation to Washington, D.C. The godfather wanted to keep on budget, so everything his family purchased was tallied up in a ledger. And I mean, everything. At one point his wife, my godmother, bought a roll of lifesavers, so he dutifully wrote lifesavers, 35 cents, in his ledger. When the family reached a certain number they were all forbidden from buying anything else for the duration of the trip. My mother's aunt, so, my great aunt, she was fairly wealthy herself, having owned a lakefront home, bought, not leased, a new Mazda Miata every 2 to 3 years, and she and her husband owned a fairly successful business. Well, whenever we'd go out for birthday dinners for my brother, they would always pick, as my brother and my great uncle shared the same birthday. After the meal was over, they'd give the entire bill to my dad and make him pay, even when he was laid off, and we weren't doing so well. And we are talking $30 to $40 plates here. This went on for a good 15 years. Granted, they share the same birthday, and it sucks as a kid whenever your little brother gets to pick a restaurant every year but you don't, to which they invited themselves to my b-day dinner and didn't pay then either. But it gets worse. They would do the same thing to my mom every year, picking the place for her b-day and making us pay the tab, and no one else's b-day was remotely close to hers. My mother finally got fed up on her 50th birthday whenever her aunt wanted to go to a $100 a plate restaurant for her birthday that year, since it was a special year, and my mom wanted to go to her favorite Mexican restaurant. She gave her aunt an earful, and to this day, they haven't spoken. Since point there are other stories too, but that one had about 15 years of build up on it, and that little event probably happened 10 years ago. Since then my brother's been married and had 3 kids, and I've been married with my first on the way, and they won't get to see any of them. When I used to work for Target, I had a woman come up with a full shopping cart and a handful of coupons, many of which were expired. For each item she bought she presented a coupon. Some of them were good ones, like 20% off an item. Others were as little as $0.15. Several coupons didn't work, such as 5% off a can of food that rang up as $0.50. She didn't want it. It took about 10 minutes to get through her entire cart with her rummaging for a coupon for that precise item that I scanned. My return bin was overflowing by the time we got through the cart. All my customers had long since drifted off into different lanes, and I knew I was going to get an R on the scoring program point. Another instance, my girlfriend and I had stopped by Subway to pick up a quick meal. Partway through ordering, while our sandwiches were being wrapped, someone, presumably the manager, turned to the younger worker who had been serving us and said, "You give people too much condiments. Give them less." She then demonstrated on the next guy's sandwich by spacing 3 tomato slices on the smallest serving of lettuce, 6 to 7 black olives, etc, etc. The guy was pissed, but didn't say anything. We quietly slipped out with our decent sized subs as I recall. Another situation involved asking for water from another Subway store. One of the senior workers told yet another younger worker that if he ever gave out one of the bigger plastic cups for soft drinks to people to use for water instead of the cheap styrofoam cups again, they'd get fired. I worked as a server in a restaurant/jazz club for a few months one summer. The owner, an enormous sheetbag for various reasons, wouldn't show up until evening when it started to get busy, and would turn on the password protected AC when he arrived and turn it off again when he left. So for most of the morning and afternoon, the cook and I got to sit around in 80-90 degree heat with our thumbs up our asses. I made no money whatsoever during those shifts, because who would want to come in and eat in a building that's hot as balls? The owner also failed to pay the $3/HR wage we agreed on when he hired me. I kept asking when I would be getting my paycheck, and he kept saying I'll see about it next week. I eventually found out none of the other waitstaff got any kind of base wage either, and realized he never intended to actually pay me the wage we'd agreed upon. When I called him on it, he threw a tantrum and said he wasn't going to run his business into the ground just to keep me as an employee, so I quit. I still wanted the $200 I figured he owed me, and he kept giving me the runaround saying he was out of town and would call me next week about it. Finally I told him, if he didn't pay me, I would file a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. My mom told me to say that, and he cussed me out and hung up on me. His sister, manager at the restaurant, called me back a few minutes later saying to come in and pick up my money. I did. She gave it to me wrapped up in a piece of tinfoil, I guess so her brother wouldn't find out. TLDR former employee refused to run the ack in his hot as balls restaurant unless he was there. He also refused to pay me. Epilogue. Restaurant went out of business a year or so later. I worked at a business once that, in my opinion, required strong customer service, since our competitors offered essentially the same product, but for less money. One day, I took a phone call from an irate customer who was complaining about an error in their bill. Apologetically, I corrected the error and told them what they actually owed us. The customer requested a copy of the corrected invoice, and I said that would be fine. I remember specifically asking whether I could email or fax the invoice to them, but they said that they had neither the internet nor a fax line. They sounded pretty old. So I said, fine, I'll mail it to you. I thought I had done a good job of handling the complaint. The customer was happy, and it had not taken me too long to find the error and correct it. My boss saw things differently. She sat in the cubicle behind me, heard the entire conversation, and as soon as I hung up she got my attention and admonished me for wasting the cost of an envelope and postage. I'm pretty sure most of my fellow employees would have just said we'll mail you the corrected invoice right away without even thinking about it, so I was already going beyond the norm in trying to save the company that piddly 60 cents or so. But did she really expect us to inflame a bad situation just to save 60 cents? TLDR boss got angry because I cost the company about 60 cents in postage to mollify an upset customer. I was on a service trip in Ecuador, and on our day off our group decided to go to the market a couple hours outside of Quito. The market was this huge sprawling network of tiny stalls which all sell the same cheap junk that is all manufactured in some nearby factory. We spent most of the day getting gifts for friends or family and meeting people who worked at the market. In our group was a guy who, let's call him Mike, was for lack of a better term, an asshole. Asshole might actually be a bit harsh, but he was at least a blowhard. His family was from Barcelona and talked about it constantly and was the kinda guy who would try to slip in things into conversation to make himself see all that at the time he wouldn't stop talking about how crazy it was that he had just been in Barcelona. Pretty nuts, eh? Anyway, I ran into him in the market and started shopping around with him. We came to a stall that was selling ornamental knives, and he decided that he wanted to buy one. The next few minutes he blew my mind as he haggled with the stall owner, who was a dirty elderly man, over a matter of $5, which would feed the stall owner for a week. He berated him, told him that he was stupid for trying to get that much money for his stupid knife, and then started walking away to show that he wouldn't pay any more than he wanted, which caused the guy to finally cave. However, in probably the ultimate example of instant karma, Mike, who was overconfident in his Spanish, confused the word sangre meaning blood for sangria, ate a potato covered in pig's blood, and spent the next 2 days puking his guts out. A friend of mine years ago, he was a retired rocket scientist, lived in a house with a pool. He refused to run the filter, except when someone was actually swimming, as he didn't want to spend the $1 per day in electricity at one of the most expensive houses in town. Of course, all the junk that would get into the water would simply hang there instead of being filtered out, and the algae would get way out of control. So he would spend a bunch of money on algaecide and lots of chemicals and tons of time trying to scrape all the crud off the bottom. But he felt like he was somehow saving money by not running the filter. Cement Pond pretty much described it. I refused to swim in it. One time when he and his wife were out of town for a month, I kicked on the filter, spent the next few days cleaning the filter several times a day, and after a week or so got some swimmable water out of it. Run the filter, check the chemicals once a day, vacuum once a week, easy to maintain. He went on a trip around the world. He took a video camera and a portable VCR, no camcorders yet, with them. To save money, instead of buying a battery for the VCR, he got a motorcycle battery, strapped strapped it onto a little two-wheel cart and proceeded to drag that around with him. Instead of simply putting a battery in the VCR and hanging it off his shoulder when the Commodore 64 computer came out, he bought one for each of several relations and one for himself. For at least a year he complained about the computer not doing anything. He refused to buy any programs for it. Tried talking me into writing a word processor for him. He was too cheap to spend $20 for one. My uncle is an attorney in Silicon Valley, and his office manager is this extremely loyal older woman who's been there for 15 years or so. Her husband is some kind of computer engineer who managed to get himself some ridiculous deal from one of those Silicon Valley tech startups a number of years ago. I don't know the exact details of this contract that he worked out with them, but it was something to this effect. He came and worked for them for a good, but not insane salary for about 5 years or so. At the end of the 5 years, he comes up with $2 million in cash, which he gives to them, and they in turn give him $17 million in stock options. I know it sounds crazy, but my uncle isn't full of shit, and apparently he genuinely had this all in writing. At the end of the 5 years he wants to cash in on this deal. Of course he doesn't have $2 million in liquid cash, so he has to go to a bank to get a loan. He brings all the paperwork with him, and the bank agrees that it all checks out, and it is made clear that, as soon as he gets the stocks, he will sell enough of them to pay back the loan right away. Well, the bank agreed to this, but when it came time to sign the final loan papers, the guy got into a full-on screaming match with the bank that almost turned physical. It turned out that he was of the opinion that, because he was going to pay the loan back so quickly, that he should not have to pay a single cent in interest or loan fees to the bank. They informed him that it didn't matter how quickly he paid it back, if he was going to borrow their money, he was going to have to pay a fee, plain and simple. He tried to accuse them of theft and fraud, and it took his wife literally slapping him across the face to get him to take the loan. I have a friend who works at a pizza joint. He was delivering a huge order of pies, calzones, pasta, and the works for a huge party. Now this restaurant adds a 10% service charge for large orders, and it took 10 cars, all sedans, to deliver all this stuff. The bill came to be about $350. The tip divided by 10 comes to about $3.50. I should delivery man. They get to the house, and the party guests are drinking, like it's the end of the world. Totally insane. My buddy rings the bell, and a huge, 6'10" guy walks to the door incredibly muscle bound. He gives the pizzas and hurries away, and doesn't dare ask for a tip. He goes back to his fellow delivery caravan, who are having a smoke, while waiting for my friend to come back. They go, "Did you get the tip?" And my friend goes, "Fuck no." The guy who answers the door is huge and would have pulverized me. After much jeering he finally goes back up and rings the bell. The door opens, and the same guy opens the door. His voice trembling, he says, "UHH sir, the tip, Mr. Universe over here." Goes, "What about it?" My friend replies, "Well, it's gonna be about Thrifty." Flying into a rage the guy screams at my friend, "God damn it, Loch Ness monster, I ain't gonna give no Thrifty." Waving his fists, he starts to punch him. My friend slithered away into the nearest lake. I bartend at a Japanese steakhouse in Charleston, SC. Being in the South, I get the typical rednecks tipping 0 and typical ghetto people tipping 0 also. So statistically it's all the same when it comes to race, in my opinion. But this particular incident was one night when 20 young black kids came in and sat at a table. They knew the table had an automatic gratuity on their bill, so they kept coming to the bar to order drinks, so they wouldn't have to tip. Heard them talking about this. Also, not one of them tipped while at the bar. Most of them ordered ice houses and goose and juice as they were screaming. By the way, I don't know what particular juice you want, unless you actually specify. What followed was the biggest level of cheapness. They ordered one bottle of champagne that cost around $14. It took 12 of them to pay for it, and about 20 minutes of them arguing who had to pay, and about another 20 minutes for me having to accept $1 here from someone, and 50 cents here from someone else. And all that one bottle of champagne had 17 separate payments on it. Along with me working my ass off for around an hour, I made not a single dollar of these kids, while being nice, polite, and serving them the best I could, and putting up with them making jokes and insulting me to my face. Fuck you kids. I went to a car boot sale for the first time about a week ago. Sellers start setting up at 9, but people aren't officially allowed in until 10. Except for at this particular place they didn't give a shit about that and let people in whenever. This means that as soon as you get out of your car you first get people asking if you are selling phones or electronics or video games so they can pawn them off at a better price. Find whatever, it's a little annoying but cool. Then as soon as you start taking stuff out of your car to set up you get people rifling through your stuff and asking for a price. So you now have to set up, get the appropriate change out, and make sure no one is nicking stuff. If they don't buy it, most people don't have the courtesy to put it back in the same place, just faking leaving it on the floor or w/e point. The worst though is the people who just try and rip you off as much as they can, not even remotely interested in paying a fraction of what it's worth. Like most people, I went to a car boot sale to get rid of stuff, to make space, not to make a profit, as a consequence selling everything for 1/10 of what it is worth. So I'm there with my mum, and we have this bag probably worth £10 brand new. Never touched it, and some dude comes over, and we tell him he can have it for £1. He keeps haggling for 50p over and over again. Eventually my mum caves, and is fine whatever. Then he gets out this faking greasy bag with 25 2p coins in it, whilst continuing to beach about it. Point advice to anyone ever: unless you have a job that pays minimum wage or only very slightly over, or unless you enjoy the culture of making people bleed for every penny, just sell the stuff that's worth a reasonable amount on eBay and give the rest away to charity and work for the day instead. You will manage to avoid the scummiest people on earth and you will make more money. About 4 years ago the manager of my company used to still use dial-up in the office. He'd connect, download his mail, and then disconnect every 3 hours. It ended up costing more than an ADSL connection would have, and eventually we switched. Point other things. He relied on hand-me-down printers. Everyone in the office had their own printer and they barely worked. Point the furniture was about 20 years old and was falling apart. Point our emails were on a 90s plan and each mailbox got 5 megabytes of storage until 2010 when I switched us over to Google Apps. The odd thing is that he'd spend on stupid stuff. He bought a company car that was more powerful than he needed and then ended up screwing the engine up by using the cheapest petrol available. Point when we travel he'll stay at the cheapest place possible. The last time I let him book a hotel he got one that had 4 rooms and decided to do very loud renovation work from 1 AM to 6 AM, at which time we had to leave to go to a meeting. We bought cars made by Proton. If you're not familiar with this brand, it's a local Malaysian car manufacturer and is cheap as shit. They can't actually hold up in an accident. Use Mitsubishi engines that are 20 years old and will dent with a very light tap. It guzzles petrol like nobody's business and has continuous problems. The petrol gauge will tell me I have 1/4 tank full, then immediately will go to the reserve light. Yesterday a colleague of mine told me a little story about my new boss. I have only been working at my job for about a month. Basically what happened was, our boss likes to pay people by check. I find this very strange in this day and age, but our boss had accidentally paid my colleague short £320. So when she saw him, after she received her check, he said he was going to the bank today anyway, and as her shift was finishing, he'll drive her to the bank and he will give her the difference. The bank is probably about 1.5 miles away at most, probably not even that far. When they arrived at the bank, I asked for the money and then began counting it out aloud in the middle of the bank and gave it to them. However, the money he gave her was £20 short. She obviously raised the problem with him when they left the bank, and he said the reason he gave her short was because he had driven her to the bank that he was going to anyway, and this is the price he was going to charge her. He didn't even say to her at the beginning of the drive that he was going to charge her, just took it without saying anything until she asked. Point what makes it worse is that my colleague, as my boss knows, is a single mother of 3, and he charged her for the journey to the bank. I thought this was pretty sickening. A cab from our workplace to the bank would probably cost £4, £5 tops. I went to a friend's birthday dinner with his siblings and 2 childhood friends. His sister paid for the meal of all the siblings, and one of his friends paid for him and his date. So I ended up splitting a check with his other childhood friend. brother of the other friend. First of all, it was a classy restaurant, and the guy refused to pay the tip. So feeling bad, I decided to cover his tip. My share was $32 and his was $31, and even though I covered $15 in tips, he didn't want the bill to be split down the middle. He didn't want to pay the 50 cents more. The restaurant offered the table a dessert tray with 3 different types of desserts. Because it was my friend's birthday, the first thing he said was, "Is it free? If it's not free, I'm not paying extra for it." And when he was told it's free, he scoffs off most of the desserts in less than a minute, making sure that no one gets to eat more than a bite. When he went to the bathroom, his brother asked me how much the bill was and shoved $20 at me, saying that he was sorry for his brother, but that's just how he is. I also found out later that he doesn't have a place to live other than his parents' house. He sleeps in a cot in his laboratory. He's a PhD student and showers in the gym because it's free. Worst part is that I realized that my friend was actually trying to set me up with him. My friend told me that we are both PhD students and that I'm cheap, but not as cheap as him. I'd like to think I'm frugal, but I would like to be wined and dined with dessert as well. I was working in a gas station a year ago. I absolutely hate that place. Not only was the pay ridiculous, but they always lacked cashiers. But you know, I did it part-time to pay off at a 2, whatever, so like always, I was the cashier on the only open register. High season, I had a ridiculous line of maybe 20 to 30 customers waiting while it was boiling hot outside and inside. Thanks we don't have aircon or heaters, fakers. Here I am, been working for 5 hours without a break, or if you prefer for 20 days without a day off. And then this stupid hose comes to my counter. She only wants to buy a cup. We sold these inside the gas station. Fine for me. I scan that thing and she pays me €3. But then she goes to her retarded husband, who then complains to her very loudly that the sign on the cup said something like €2.80 blah blah, comes to my counter and demands to get the advertised price, making a big scene. He goes all on over me, reciting laws he made up. Tells me it's in the Constitution that he deserves that 20 quart discount. Now I'm pretty pissed because I hate that shop. I hate the heat, the zillions of customers just being rude as holes, the constant stress. Whatever, I take the time to tell him about the Constitution and where to find the law he was referring to and about what it really says. Thanks, school. I mean, I could just have given him the 20 quart, but I'd have to pay them myself. Fuck you, gas station. So I won't do a damn for this faking prick. I go to get the manager, who was very busy and stressed herself, explain everything and make her go inside her office to fix the system's price for that cup. After just 15 minutes he got his faking 20 quart and the whole line of customers hated him. When I was a teen, my group of friends would go to my cousin's house to hang out and play games. We would take turns bringing beverages. I was fond of Sprite. Others liked Mountain Dew. Whenever it was the week for one of my other friends to bring them, he would purchase Shasta. $0.10 per can plus a $0.10 per can deposit. Then at the end of the night would gather the cans to return later. Guys, help me look around. I'm missing 2 cans. It was crazy. On these same nights he would be the guy who would count people and pizza slices. And though not good at math, he was like Rain Man when it came to slice division. There are 6 of us and 3 pizzas of 8 slices each, which means 4 slices per person. Then would proceed to monitor consumption. Justin, you only had 3. Can I have your last slice? If you don't want it, then I would set it aside to take home for snack/breakfast/whatever. Years later, the same cousin is getting married. We got fitted for our tuxedos. He offers to take us to lunch. Didn't have a lot of money, so we went to Arby's, which was fine with me. We place our orders, and it comes time for our cheap friend to order. He says, "I'll have a big Montana, curly fries, a Jamaica shake, and another big Montana and some jalapeno poppers to go." He casually looks at the rest of us and says, "Dinner tonight." There are more, but I could go on for a while, so we'll stop here. Love him, but he is cheap. I experienced this from the other end actually, but I still feel I was justified in my cheapness. My friend and I were going to go on a day trip to New York City. She wanted to take a bus which would be $40 round trip, and I wanted to take a train which involved us driving for half an hour, but would only cost $20 round trip for each of us at the time. I was a broke college student with maybe $100 to my name. I was working at the time, so I was really rolling in dough. And also want to avoid asking my parents for money as much as I could, since they weren't doing too well financially either. All of this she knew. She, on the other hand, got all of her money from her parents, who were still doing well financially. I'm not really bitter about that, but I thought I'd give some insight into where we are both coming from. Well, she wanted to take the bus because it was more convenient, and I wanted to take the train because it was cheaper, and even offered to drive us both there. We were talking about this on the phone, and she said, "Spassa freak, we'd just be saving $20. Who cares?" In the background, I heard her mom say $20? Wow, he is always so cheap. I wish I could say that at this point. I told her to fuck off and went to hang out with other friends. But no, I ended up taking the bus with her to Nick Point. However, at some point during the trip, I realized that she and her family had always thought I was really cheap. I felt horrible for a bit, but then realized that her family was actually really stupid, and the only reason I cared about their opinion of me was because she and I had dated for a year. Trip was a few years after we dated. It turned out to be pretty damn cathartic for me actually, because I had all these epiphanies and realized that I still cared way too much about what she and her family thought of me, and that this made me feel miserable with her. So I said fuck it, and just stopped giving a shit, which made the rest of that trip way better. I only talked to her a few times after that over the next couple years. Mostly the obligatory "hey, we haven't seen each other in a while, and should hang out and stuff," and I haven't really talked to her at all in a couple years. And man, does it feel good. TLDR, someone else makes fun of me for being cheap. I realize that I care too much about what they think and stop giving a shit about them. Okay, the censure. One of my sister's mother-in-law is the queen of cheap. A couple of years ago she got a voucher for some doll. She went down and bought it the next week. The problem, the voucher has expired. She then spent the next half an hour abusing the checkout chick, and then the checkout chick's manager, until some nice guy behind her offered to pay the extra $15. I would've paid, but I was a poor 14-year-old to get her to, in his words, shut the fuck up and move along. Quite embarrassing for me. When we got back to my sister's house, she then started unpacking the doll and trying to get it to work. By this time no one could give a shit. Everyone ignores her most of the time. Eventually she gives up and decides that it is defective. She then leaves with the doll, and an hour later comes back and proudly announces that she got a replacement doll and a refund. She then proceeds to try to get this doll to work and fails. By this time it's about 8 at night and she's gone full rage. I want some peace and quiet to play freelancer with my brother-in-law, so I offer to look at the doll for her. I look at it and ask, "You do notice it needs batteries to work?" Put the required 4AA batteries in, and it starts working perfectly. TLDR, my sister's mother-in-law first got her purchase subsidized by a Good Samaritan, then after not being able to get her purchase to work declared it defective and returned it. I assume complained enough to get both a refund and a replacement. Turns out she just hadn't put batteries into the first one, and I had to put batteries into the replacement for her. Haven't been to the shops with her since. At my cousin's 18th birthday party in England, we were at a restaurant with about 50 to 60 people all on one massively long table. Half of his family are Scottish, my side of the family, and the other English, his mom's side, and, for whatever reason, we were situated at different ends of this gargantuan table. The meal itself was quite nice, nothing special, your typical 3-course reheated pub grub affair. Everyone seemed to be having a good time. When it came to calling it a night and settling the bill, we assumed that all the adults pay £20 each, which would cover their meals and the meals for the 10 to 12 children. No way I'd condone making a child pay for their own meal. That seemed fine for all of us, until we heard a commotion down the other end of the table. They were actually bickering about who ordered what, who had kids and who didn't, who skipped dessert, and who was drinking alcoholic drinks and who didn't. Not a few of them were pulling out pieces of paper and pencils to calculate their exact expenses. My cousin, the birthday boy, looked ashamed, and all of us on our side of the table were aghast at the sheer pettiness of it. It was embarrassing. The thing was, all the kids were Ths, yet we were offering to pay for them. It's one of the lowest things I've ever seen TLDR. Some family want to split a £500 plus bill by what each individual ordered. My cousin is scumbagishly cheap. I have nothing against trying to save a little money, but he takes it to douchebag levels. When he came out to visit us last, and probably for the last time, here are just a few of the things he did. He and my brother went to the boardwalk. My brother was around 17 at the time, didn't have much money on him. What he did have he spent on the arcades for the both of them. After they were hungry, my bro only had $1 left. My cousin ordered a slew of food for himself. My brother asked he could borrow $1 for a hot dog, which cost $2. My brother, knowing what a cheap fuck this guy's, also said, or I'll just have to use my charm to get it for $1. Cousin told him to use his charm. Brother wound up getting the hot dog. Cousin invited our female cousin out to a bar for drinks. I opted out of going as I don't much care for either of them. Female cousin relayed this story to me because she hadn't ever seen anything like it. They had something like 6 to 7 beers each, and my female cousin went, in a completely false gesture of sincerity, because it was he who invited her out, and well, she's a lady, and to pay, and scumbag cousin not only told her not to, he didn't even offer to pay for his own drinks. When I visited him, I was 15 and this is halfway across the country. I needed to grab something to eat at the airport. He knew I only had $20 left, but let me go right ahead and spend $15 of it on a burger and fries. He was about 32 at the time and let me, his 15-year-old cousin, get on a plane with just $5 bucks. TLDR, my cousin trumps all. When it comes to cheapness, he drags it down to a rhyme, just a flat out total piece of shit level. I have an aunt that is pretty much despised in our family. She has a rich sister that moved to America years ago and sends her money every now and then. She doesn't work, and both her kids left home because they could manage better on their own. Her husband left her years ago. I never even met him. When invited to a party or birthday or whatever, she never brings anything. I understand that not everyone has spare food or money. But she comes, sits, and at random intervals she'll sigh and say, "Oh, I wish I had brought something, but I didn't have money for it," or "I didn't know what to bring," in a tone that makes me want to slap her. Or she'll somehow manage to get to the place using public transport, but 30 minutes before she decides it's time to go, she'll start whining and sighing again and moaning, "Oh, I wish someone could drive me home." How fucking passive aggressive can you be while maintaining greed? She keeps telling everyone she has no money for new clothes or stuff like TV or car, whines that she's fat, but whenever I was at her home, she had something sweet to eat, some cake, many things with sugar and calories. She has money, but she'd rather spend it on food than whine to everyone that she's fat and she can't lose weight, no matter how much she goes on diets. I'm honestly surprised her sister is still sending her money. She's a lazy, greedy, bloated whale that is the most unlikable person in our family. During my senior year of college, a friend of mine and I took a class with one of the most popular and prominent professors at our business school. All semester, he would humbly brag about his successes, how he rose to be a very senior person in the bank he worked at, and how he trained a lot of disciples who are now also very successful, etc. My friend and I, as graduating seniors, asked him to lunch so that we could develop a relationship with him and hopefully his network. He kept kosher, so he suggested we eat at the kosher dining hall on campus. Though all the campus food was pretty terrible, this dining hall was particularly bad, and neither of us had eaten there since our freshman years, even though he too kept kosher. But we agreed, since, hey, that's where he wanted to eat, and who are we to say no? I was hoping that he would take us to the faculty club, where neither of us had been, but had heard was quite nice. No such luck. This dining hall was a pay before you enter, buffet style, all you can eat type of place. I approached the register first and paid with cash, as it became clear the professor was not going to offer to pay. As my friend starts to pay, he gets this smirk and asks us which one of us is going to use our meal plan to pay for him. Of course, neither of us have had meal plans for years. What a tremendous waste of money. I mean, here is a guy who's been in the finance industry for years and is basically a legend, asking two unemployed college students to buy him lunch. Unfortunately, my friend was caught and had to pay for both the professor and himself for pretty shitty food. I offered to split it with him later. I always thought of that as kind of a strange move on the professor's part. TLDR, a prominent, that is rich, professor at my undergraduate university's business school took my friend and I out to lunch and asked us to use a meal plan we didn't have to pay for his meal. Probably getting buried, but here goes. Me, my wife and my daughter are joining some of my wife's family to go to the Boston Aquarium for the day. One of these family members includes my wife's uncle. My wife's uncle is Jewish. Now, I know what you are all thinking. This guy's a racist. Well, maybe I'm a bit racist, but this guy's your stereotypical Jew. I have heard many stories regarding his cheapness, but never experienced it myself. So, we get to the aquarium. Another thing you should know, my wife is 9 months pregnant, 2-year-old and pregnant wife, at a packed aquarium. Awesome. We had a great day regardless. We see literally everything and finish at a place where you can pet stingrays. Seeing my wife is exhausted, my daughter is getting cranky. I make mention of it being time to leave. At this point my wife's uncle says, well, there's a couple exhibits we missed upstairs, so just wait for me outside. Strange, but that's cool. The rest of us go outside, find a coffee shop and ice cream for the kids. Well, now my daughter is becoming a demon. Time to go as soon as possible. Text to my wife's uncle requesting his location. And I quote, there's a show that starts in 15 minutes that I want to see. I'll be out after. I'll come again. So we've been at the aquarium for 4 hours, waited outside for 45 minutes, and now you're going to a show by yourself while my pregnant wife and hellish child are waiting to drive an hour home. Yay. The ticket to get in was $22 and he had to get every penny's worth. TLDR, my wife's uncle is a stereotypical Jew. I have 2.1. I was trying to buy a copy of Pokemon Yellow from a friend of mine, and when I asked how much, he said $30. I told him that I would only buy it for around $15. He then lowered the price to $18, but I didn't have my wallet. Then, I checked my pockets, and I had $17 and like 5 pennies. I told him I could only do 17 and he said, okay, then throw in the pennies. I didn't know what to say. He has never been like this ever too. When I was about 9 years old, I remember going to a neighbor's house for dinner. They are gone now. All they had was salad. I was little and didn't like salad, and I told my mom this. The neighbor heard, and she said, well, sorry, we don't have anything else. Her husband set her straight, and she warmed me up 3 Tyson chicken nuggets. Then she brought out Oreo cookies for dessert. I know they are sweets, but giving each person 1 Oreo wasn't dessert. Anyways, when I went to grab one, she told me that I didn't eat the salad, so I couldn't have one. When we were all done with our food, which was served on paper plated with plastic silverware, she got the fine china and scraped all the mess left on them into the garbage, wiped the plates clean, and then began to do the same with the silverware. When we all looked like she was crazy, she said, oh, my grandmother gave me these, so I gotta clean them. Well, yeah, those are my stories. Sorry if they are long.